Bride of Ashes. Elora gripped the stiff bristles of the scrub brush until her knuckles turned white, pushing it across the cold flagstones in slow, punishing circles. Gray afternoon light bled through the high windows, outlining her hunched figure in a watery glow that did nothing to warm the drafty corridor. Every strike of the brush sent droplets of murky water spattering up her arms, dampening the thin sleeves of her worn dress. Her knees ached against the stone, but she kept her head down and her breathing quiet. The echo of her work masked the faint tremor in her chest, an unsteady rhythm she'd learned to hide as carefully as the bruises that dotted her ribs. Footsteps clicked behind her. Elora stiffened, knowing that brisk, unhurried cadence too well. She bowed her head lower, drawing her hair like a curtain over her face. "Look at the filth." Lady Marissa's voice sliced through the hush of the hallway, cultured tones gilded with disdain. "If a girl can't keep her own home clean, what use is she to any respectable man?" Elora didn't speak. She had learned silence was safer than any reply. Still, humiliation burned hot beneath her skin. The brush slipped briefly from her fingers. Before she could grab it, Marissa's shoe, polished leather embroidered with silver thread, came down on the wooden handle. Clumsy, Marissa pressed harder until the wood creaked. "Pick it up." Elora reached, risking a glance upward. Her stepmother's beauty was as precise as a painted icon. Pale gold hair coiled in perfect loops, ice-blue eyes that never thawed, lips tinted rose, though the kindness such softness suggested had long since curdled. Marissa's gaze swept over Elora's work-worn hands and threadbare dress with open disgust. "Well, are you struck dumb along with being graceless?" "No, my lady," Elora murmured, reclaiming the brush. Water dripped from the bristles onto her skirt. "Speak up," Marissa said, as if addressing a servant, too stupid to follow simple commands. "One might think you're embarrassed." Elora forced her voice steady. "I'm not embarrassed to work, my lady." Marissa laughed softly. "Of course you aren't. How could you be? It's the only purpose you've ever served. Heaven knows no suitor would want a girl who skulks about like an orphaned alley cat." Elora's stomach clenched. Though she wasn't motherless, the title might as well have fit. The woman standing above her showed no hint of family affection, only possession. But the words that hurt most weren't Marissa's insults. They were the muffled scrape of another pair of boots, heavier, approaching from the far end of the corridor. Lord Aldrich. Elora's father used to carry her on his shoulders through the apple orchards beyond the manor walls. She remembered the sweet tang of fruit on her tongue, his booming laugh, the promise that no harm would ever touch her. That man vanished the day Marissa married him. Now he was a ghost in fine clothes, haunting rooms she scrubbed clean. Aldrich halted beside his wife. His once dark beard had thinned and new silver threaded the hair at his temples. But the change that pained Elora most gleamed in his eyes. They looked past her, not at her. She straightened, water dripping from her fingers. "My lord." She hadn't called him father in years. The word stuck like thorns behind her teeth. He acknowledged her with a curt nod, neither kind nor cruel, merely indifferent. "Is the floor finished?" "Not yet," Elora said softly. Aldrich's gaze flicked to Marissa for approval, as if seeking permission to form a thought, and then drifted back. "See it done before dusk," he said. "We expect guests tonight." Marissa's lips curved. "Important guests. Try to appear presentable, and for heaven's sake, keep silent unless you're spoken to." Elora dipped her head. "Yes, my lady." The couple moved on, their conversation fading into the clatter of servants preparing the manor for evening. Elora's shoulders sagged once they were gone. She huddled closer to the bucket, clutching the brush like a talisman. A dull ache pulsed behind her eyes, but she willed herself not to cry. She repeated an old promise, quietly, fiercely. "I will not break. Not for her, not for anyone." Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, a bell tolled, its sound carried on a sudden gust that sneaked through cracked shutters. The day was slipping toward twilight. Elora forced her limbs back to motion, letting the rhythm of scrubbing drown the restless thought that always stirred at dusk, the thought of running. She had chased the idea down countless corridors of imagination, only to slam into the locked gates of reality each time. There was no coin for passage, no friend to shelter her, no safe road between here and freedom. Still, the idea lingered like a half-remembered melody. Run, run, run. That same wind brought distant voices. Elora paused, listening. It wasn't the clipped instructions of servants, but a growing murmur, men and women talking all at once, agitated. She rose slowly, brushing her damp palms against her skirt. The bucket sloshed as she set it aside. Outside, the courtyard hedges rustled with uneasy gathering. Boots scraped on gravel. A carriage bearing the royal crest stood near the gate, its polished doors still shut. Guards in crimson cloaks fanned out, clearing a path toward the central square beyond the manor grounds. Elora's pulse quickened. Royal envoys never visited isolated estates like this without reason. Her first instinct was to stay hidden. Marissa would punish her for eavesdropping. Yet some instinct stronger than fear tugged her forward. She skirted the hall's shadows, slipped through an open archway, and drifted into the bustle at the edge of the crowd. Villagers had come too, farmers still smelling of hay, craftspeople with dust on their sleeves, children clinging to mothers' skirts. Their faces wore the same wary hope. Perhaps the envoys brought news of lower taxes, or a fresh grain allowance before winter. Conversation stuttered into silence when the carriage door swung open. A herald stepped out, resplendent in violet and gold. Sunlight caught the silver trumpets emblazoned on his breastplate. He unfurled a parchment as long as his arm and cleared his throat. Inhabitants of the northern province, when he began, voice projecting across the square. By decree of his imperium, and in accordance with the covenant of flames, the time of offering has come again. A hush fell, sharp, expectant. Elora's heart plummeted. Covenant of flames. Everyone knew the words, spoken once every decade, the ritual that had kept ash storms and dragon fire from their fields for nearly a century. The herald scanned the crowd. 10 years have passed since the last sacrifice. The eldest unmarried maiden of pure virtue shall be delivered to the dragon lord Rhaegar at sundown, 3 days hence. In exchange, the realm shall enjoy another decade of peace. A frail cry broke the silence. Mothers drew daughters behind them. Men exchanged helpless glances. The decree was ancient, unbreakable. There would be no protest, yet the air vibrated with dread. The herald lifted the scroll higher. Step forward and declare the name of the maiden who rightfully fulfills this decree. No one moved. The square felt suspended in time until the crowd split like fabric torn by a blade. Marissa strode through, head held high, pearl earrings winking against her graceful neck. She walked as if the earth itself belonged beneath her feet. Aldrich hurried a step behind her, eyes fixed on the ground. "Your Grace," Marissa said, stopping before the herald. "I come as a loyal servant to the throne to present my stepdaughter, Elora. She is 22, virtuous, and untouched, as any servant in our house can attest." A ripple of whispers swept the crowd. Elora froze, every breath turning cold inside her chest. The herald arched an eyebrow politely. "Is this maiden present among us?" Marissa turned, her gaze zeroing in on Elora with predatory precision. "Come, child," she called, voice loud enough for all to hear. "Do not be afraid. Your sacrifice will protect us all." Elora found her feet rooted. Villagers stepped aside, forming a corridor she could not refuse. She turned to run, then saw her father's face. Aldrich's expression was blank, but his eyes flicked once to Marissa and back. Silent approval. Something inside Elora cracked. She forced herself forward, each step echoing like thunder between her ears. When she reached the stone platform, the herald studied her closely. His gaze lingered on the calluses lining her palms, on the faint bruise under one eye. Perhaps he guessed the truth of her upbringing. Perhaps he simply didn't care. "Do you, Elora of House Delcare, accept the honor of safeguarding your people?" he asked. A dozen responses caught in her throat: anger, refusal, hysterical laughter. She swallowed them all. Marissa's slender fingers rested on her shoulder, deceptively gentle, nails biting warning crescents into her skin. Elora spoke through numb lips. I hear the decree." The herald nodded. Two guards stepped forward, bearing chains of braided silver. They fastened the cuffs around Elora's wrists with ceremonial gravity, even as her pulse hammered so loudly she wondered if they felt it through the metal. The weight of the chains dragged her arms slightly apart, humbling posture forced upon her no matter how tall she tried to stand. Marissa leaned in. "Hold your head high, the least you can do is die with grace." Elora faced her. "I'm not dying today." The stepmother's smile faltered, but before she could reply, Aldrich placed a hand on Marissa's sleeve and murmured something Elora couldn't hear. His gaze skittered across his daughter's face like a stone skipping water, never settling before he turned away. Two more guards took position at Elora's sides. The herald rolled up his parchment with a snap. "Prepare the offering," he declared. "She departs at dawn tomorrow." Elora scarcely felt her feet as they marched her toward the manor gates. The crowd parted, some people reaching out, perhaps to offer comfort, perhaps to touch the living legend she'd already become, but the guards barked them back. Children stared with round, solemn eyes. In the hush, she caught whispers. "She always seemed kind. I heard the dragon's claws are black as iron. 10 years of peace, and it's a blessing." Her breath clouded in the cooling air. Above, clouds gathered like bruises across the sky. A single thought beat through the numbness. This cannot be happening. The gates clanged behind her. The guards ushered her to a narrow carriage reserved for prisoners. One opened the door, gestured at the wooden bench inside. Elora hesitated, feeling every pair of eyes on her. She drew a breath that tasted of iron and smoke. When she spoke, her voice was low but clear enough for Marissa to hear across the courtyard. "I will not break." Marissa's smile returned, thin and vicious. "We'll see." The carriage door shut, sealing Elora inside. Iron bolts slid home with finality. She pressed her cheek to the barred window and watched the courtyard shrink as the carriage rolled toward the main road. Marissa's silhouette remained at the gates, pale hair shining like a distant flame until distance and dust swallowed it. Alone in the dim confines, Elora curled her bound wrists against her chest. A storm raged behind her eyes, grief swirling with a savage rising heat she barely recognized as her own anger. Chains rattled as the wheels jostled over uneven ground. Somewhere ahead waited a mountain where the sky bled ash and a dragon lord who destroyed kingdoms. Somewhere behind lay the life she'd known, empty rooms, cold eyes, and floors she could never scrub clean enough. Elora pressed her forehead to the bars and whispered into the gathering dusk. "I will not break, I will burn before I break." The carriage rumbled on, its wheels marking the road to the end, or the beginning, of everything she had ever been. The cell smelled of damp straw and rusted chains, but Elora barely noticed. Hours ticked by in aching stillness, long enough for the sky beyond the narrow window to turn black, then bruise purple with the first hint of dawn. Each distant flutter of wings or scrape of a rat set her nerves jangling. She tested the silver manacles looped through a ring in the wall, hoping they'd loosen overnight. But her wrists remained trapped in a short span of chain that forced her to sit upright against the stone. Cold crept through her ceremonial robe. Refusing to shiver, she focused on steady breaths that did little to calm her racing pulse. A soft squeak of hinges drew her gaze to the iron door. Light spilled in, throwing a long shadow over the straw. A servant, one she recognized vaguely, a girl called Morel, slipped inside carrying a brass basin and a folded length of white silk. Her plain face tightened with uncertainty when she saw Elora awake. "I have to wash you," Morel whispered, eyes darting down the corridor. Lady Marissa ordered it. Elora nodded, pushing tangled hair behind her ears. Thank you. Morel knelt, soaking a cloth in the warm water. I'm sorry, she murmured as she dabbed gently at Elora's abraded wrists. This shouldn't be happening. Elora swallowed. You didn't chain me. I still feel guilty. She hesitated, pressing the cloth to a bruise on Elora's forearm. Why didn't your father stop it? Elora closed her eyes. Because he believes the sacrifice is necessary. Or maybe he just believes her. She didn't have the strength to untangle that knot again. Morel finished cleaning away dirt and dried blood, then unfolded the silk robe, a shimmering garment embroidered with tiny flames and silver thread. I'm supposed to dress you in this. Elora stared at the robe's luminous fabric. It looks expensive. It belonged to Lord Aldrich's first wife, Morel said softly. He kept it hidden until last night, when Lady Marissa demanded something worthier of the dragon's bride. A sharp pang wedged beneath Elora's ribs. She remembered flashes of her mother's laughter, memories Marissa insisted she forget. She reached for the robe but could only lift her arms a fraction. Morel drew closer, undoing the shackles long enough to slide the garment over Elora's head and tie a braided sash around her waist. The silk felt like cool water against her skin. The servant's gaze flicked over Elora's face. You're shaking. Am I? Elora steadied her hands. I can't decide if it's fear or rage. Both, probably. Morel clipped a thin chain back around Elora's wrists, leaving enough slack for her to walk. They told me to braid your hair. She paused, then spoke in an urgent undertone. The driver said the road to the mountain is narrow. If the carriage slows jump runs south into the ravine, no one follows that path. Elora's breath caught. Why are you telling me this? Because you were always kind to the maids, even when Lady Marissa mocked you for it. Morel began weaving Elora's auburn hair into a thick plait. And because I hate her. If you escape, maybe that will hurt her. Elora's throat tightened. They'll punish you. I'll deny everything. Morel tucked a last strand into place, then pressed something small and metallic into Elora's palm, a bent hairpin sharpened at the tip. Hide it. Footsteps clanged beyond the door. Morel snatched up the basin and backed toward the exit. Good luck, she whispered, then hurried out as two guards entered, armored in dark steel etched with the royal crest. Elora of House Dalcair, the taller guard intoned, unlocking her manacles from the wall. He snapped a new chain between her wrists, shorter than before. It's time. They marched her through the manor's east wing, halls she'd polished until they gleamed now, flashing past like scenes from another life. At the foot of the grand staircase, Lord Aldrich waited. He wore a fur-lined cloak against the morning chill, eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Marissa stood beside him, draped in crimson velvet, the picture of mourning dignity, if one ignored the satisfied tilt of her lips. Elora expected commands, perhaps one final cutting remark. Instead, Aldrich cleared his throat. I came to offer guidance, he said, voice rough. Remember your duty, child. The safety of thousands rests on your shoulders now. Elora searched his face for even a flicker of fatherly anguish. All she saw was weary resignation. I was your daughter before I was their shield, she said quietly. Aldrich's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Marissa stepped forward, adjusting the lay of Elora's braid with mock tenderness. Such noble resolve, she murmured for her ears alone. I wonder how long it will last inside a dragon's maw. Elora met her gaze. Longer than your veneer of kindness. She leaned closer. When I'm gone, who will you torment? Marissa's hand tightened on the braid, giving it a vicious yank. I'm sure I'll find a way to fill my days, she said sweetly, before gesturing to the guards. Escort her. They led Elora through the courtyard where dawn mist curled around frost-tipped hedges. A carriage waited, larger than the prison wagon, yet barred and rimmed with iron. Two black horses pawed the gravel, breath steaming. The driver nodded curtly as Elora climbed inside. The door slammed. Bolts slid home. Elora sank onto the padded bench. With her hands bound, she fingered the sharpened hairpin hidden inside her sleeve. Morel's hope burned like a small candle. As the wheels lurched forward, she peered through the slats. Marissa waved to the guards, a graceful silhouette against the pale morning sky. Aldrich's shoulders slumped as though all the air inside him had leaked away. Neither spared Elora a last glance. The manor vanished behind a rise in the road. Fields rolled past, naked stubble glowing gold under the climbing sun. Villagers knelt beside the road, making the sign of blessing or cowering behind cartwheels. Elora's gaze snagged on each face. Fear, pity, relief that fate hadn't chosen them. She wondered whether any of them would remember her name 10 years from now, when the herald returned to claim another life. Mid-morning, the convoy left the farmlands for a narrow pass between sheer cliffs. The path cut west toward the Ashen Range, where the earth changed color, green fading to gray-black rock, trees giving way to scorched scrub that crackled beneath the horses' hooves. Volcanic smoke smudged the horizon like thunderheads that never rained. The smell of sulfur thickened in Elora's lungs. Hours later, the lead guard called a halt near a stone bridge arching over a ravine. The horses stamped anxiously, sensing the unstable ground. Elora's pulse quickened. Morel's directions echoed. Jump when the carriage slows. She tested the cuff chain, pressing the pin against a twisted link. The metal scraped, spitting tiny sparks, but the iron held. Her heart hammered as the carriage lurched forward again, slowly now, wheels bumping across missing planks in the bridge. Voices rose outside. Hold steady. Easy. Almost there. Elora slid the pin into the cuff's keyhole. Click. The left shackle fell loose around her wrist. She worked the right, breath ragged. Another click, then a sudden shout from outside. Ho, something spooked the rear horse. The carriage jerked sideways. Elora tumbled off the bench, wrists free, rolling toward the opposite door. She righted herself, nerves blazing. This is it. She flung her weight at the door. It gave an inch, then slammed shut against the chain latch. She scrambled for the window, pushing her shoulders through the narrow gap, one leg braced to propel herself. A gauntleted hand seized her braid and yanked backward. The tall guard's face appeared in the window, eyes like flint. Stay inside unless you fancy the ravine. Elora twisted, managing to slip the braid free but losing her hairpin in the scuffle. The guard wrenched the door open, stepped in, and shoved her onto the floor. Chains clattered as he refastened her wrists, his grip bruised. Try that again, he said, tightening the cuffs, and I'll bind your ankles too. Elora glared up. You think the dragon will thank you for delivering me in one piece? Orders are orders, he muttered, hauling her upright. For what it's worth, I hope he eats the lot of them, starting with the witch who volunteered you. Now sit. Surprise flickered through Elora's fury. She obeyed, folding her hands, newly manacled, in her lap. The guard backed out, latching the door. The convoy creaked forward. The bridge groaned behind them, swallowed by scorched hills. By late afternoon, the mountains towered on all sides. Ash sifted from an occluded sky, dusting the carriage roof. Heat seeped through the wood. Sweat dampened Elora's collar. When at last the wheels crunched onto solid basalt and slowed to a stop, she braced herself. A lock turned. The door swung wide. The guard's formation changed, less wary of her escape, more of what lay ahead. A cliff road climbed to a fortress carved from the flank of a smoking peak. Its jagged spires rose like the ribs of a giant beast, red light pulsing between seams of obsidian stone. Rivers of cooled lava formed glossy terraces that glimmered under drifting ash. One guard unhooked her chains from the carriage floor, motioning forward. Elora stepped down, silk robe whispering against the rock. Heat shimmered off the black ground. Her slippers offered little protection. Each breath felt like inhaling a furnace draft. The march toward the fortress blurred until doorways swallowed her view of the sky. Inside, the air glowed dim russet from veins of molten magma threading the walls. Carved reliefs of ancient dragons lined the corridor, jaws agape, claws extended, wings wrapping doorways like molten guardians. Elora's escort said nothing, footsteps echoing over a bridge of iron plates that spanned a chasm of roiling lava far below. Every so often, a distant bellow reverberated through the stone, and her stomach tightened. At last, massive wooden doors banded in black steel loomed ahead. A smaller iron door stood inset within one of them. The lead guard produced a key the length of his forearm, slid it into the lock. With a groan, the iron door swung inward to reveal a chamber soaked in orange light. Tapestries depicting dragons in mid-flight, a canopy bed draped in crimson silk, a high-backed chair carved like entwined serpents. 2 braziers flanked the wide window where volcanic smoke curled upward toward a dim sky. The guard gestured. Inside. Elora stepped across the threshold. The door clanged shut. Bolts slid. She was alone. She pressed her palm to her racing heart, turning in a slow circle to study the room. Despite the heat, a draft brushed her neck, a vent carved high in the corner, breathing in rhythm with the mountain. A low table bore a silver decanter and 2 goblets. She moved closer, fingers trembling, and poured water that smelled faintly of minerals. She drank, splashing coolness over her lips. The chains felt heavier now. She scanned for anything sharp, but found only cushions and embroidered rugs. She approached the massive wooden wardrobe, tugged at its handle. It was locked. Restless, she circled the bed, trailing fingers along the silk duvet. Something glinted on the nightstand. A polished obsidian comb and a single white orchid, its petals untouched by ash. She lifted the flower. It smelled faintly of citrus. Impossibly fresh here. Below the orchid lay a scrap of parchment. She unfolded it. Eat. Rest. Someone will come for you when the sun dips behind the western ridge. The handwriting was fluid, confident, no signature. Elora traced the ink with her thumb. A prickling awareness crawled up her spine. An invisible gaze, ancient and heavy, settling on her. She turned, searching the chamber's corners, but saw only flickering shadows. She poured another drink and paused. The silence fractured. From somewhere beyond the thick walls came a rhythmic thud, like colossal wings beating. Stone groaned. Cinders drifted from the ceiling. Instinct screamed, something is coming. Elora set the goblet down with shaking fingers. She paced, blood roaring in her ears. She tugged at the silver chain, testing each link. The metal held. The thud returned, closer now, shaking dust from wall carvings. A shadow rippled across the window, blocking the molten glow. Then a roar, low, guttural, rolled through the castle, vibrating the very air inside Elora's lungs. She flinched as a torch guttered, nearly snuffed by the tremor. Heat spiked. A gust of smoke-tinged wind blasted through the vent, fluttering tapestries, sending her braid whipping against her shoulders. The iron door latch scraped. Elora spun, chains clinking, the handle twisted. She braced herself, breath sharp as glass. The door swung wide on a hush of ash-laden air. No guard stepped through. Only silence. Dense. Expectant. Then a figure emerged from the darkness, tall as the doorframe. Shoulders broad, hair black as volcanic glass. Firelight danced across bare skin etched with shadows of overlapping scales. Eyes golden as the core of a furnace locked onto hers. Elora's heart seized. Rhaegar. He crossed the threshold without a sound, smoke curling around his boots. Behind him, the hallway flickered with crimson light, hinting at vast wings retreating into mist before vanishing. He studied her, gaze sweeping from the manacles on her wrists to the orchid still clutched between her fingers. "You wear my mother's silk," he said, voice molten and strangely calm. "An unexpected kindness from your captors." Elora's voice came out cracked. "Kindness isn't their talent." His eyes lingered on the faint bruises circling her wrists. No, I suppose not. He stepped closer. The heat of him was tangible, a living hearth. She wanted to step back but held her ground. I am Elora, she said, chin lifting. I know who you are. He glanced at the silver cuffs. Do those chains comfort you? They remind me what I'm up against. Something flickered in his gaze. Amusement? Regret? He reached out, fingers brushing the chain. In a movement too fast to track, he snapped the cuff from her left wrist. Metal shrieked. He repeated the motion on the right, tossing the broken links to the floor. Fear is reasonable, he said, stepping back, and slavery is not. Elora rubbed her wrists, torn between gratitude and fresh unease. Everything about him defied expectation, the measured calm in his voice, the subtle courtesy. Yet power radiated from him, raw and volatile. She sensed it coiled beneath his skin like a serpent waiting to strike. What do you want from me? She asked. His gaze traveled over her slowly, not in lust but in assessment, as though examining puzzle pieces scattered on a table. Perhaps I'll know when you stop trembling. Her cheeks flushed hot. I'm not trembling. His lips quirked. Of course. He moved to the window, staring out at rivers of lava blinking like guttering stars. She noticed the faint hitch in his breath, as if each inhale was a choice. When he turned back, the glow behind him silhouetted a partial span of scales at his shoulders, shimmering before sinking beneath human skin again. I won't kill you, Elora, he said, but your life is bound to mine now. If you understand the prophecy, you know why. I know only that a woman must die for 10 years of peace. Death is cheaper than truth, he murmured, eyes clouding. So kings prefer it. He lifted a hand as if to touch her cheek, then dropped it. Rest, eat. Tomorrow will test us both. He pivoted toward the door. Wait, she blurted. He paused. She swallowed. If you are not the monster they say, why keep this tradition? Why accept unwilling brides? He looked over his shoulder, firelight carving planes of grief into his face. Because even monsters grow weary of war. The door clicked shut behind him. Elora stared at the iron panels, heart pounding like a drum of war inside her ribs. Chains lay broken at her feet, yet she couldn't decide if she was freer now, or caught in a larger snare. Her pulse counted the seconds, each one echoing with questions no one had answered. Outside, a fresh tremor rippled through the mountain, rattling the goblets. Far below, magma hissed. Elora exhaled shakily and whispered to the empty chamber. Tomorrow, then. Night seeped into the stone corridors, one slow breath at a time, carrying a hush that pressed against the walls of Elora's chamber. She paced the rug with silent steps, every sense attuned to the mountain's pulse. Far below, molten rock churned in unseen veins, a distant heartbeat echoing her own. Occasionally, a tremor shivered through the floor, rattling the goblets on the table and sending sparks skittering from the braziers. She had eaten a little of the bread and smoked cheese left on a tray, but hunger lingered, threaded with nerves. Time blurred. Without chains, her hands moved restlessly, fingering embroidery on the robe, tugging at loose strands in her braid, tracing the carved serpents on a bedpost. Sleep tempted her, yet fear of dreaming kept her upright. She tried to imagine escape again, but here, in the Dragon's Mountain, every wall felt as thick as destiny itself. A knock rapped softly and the iron door opened. 2 women entered, neither the maids from her father's house nor servants of any court she recognized. They wore dark gowns, cinched in gold cords, hair coiled and pinned with obsidian. Neither spoke, but one approached with a low wooden stool while the other set a lacquer box on the table. Elora stood still as they loosened her braid and combed out her hair with the obsidian comb. They worked quickly and gently, weaving her hair into a crown of loops and ribbons that framed her face. The sensation was oddly soothing despite the circumstances. When they finished, the first woman opened the box to reveal a coil of delicate gold chain. Tiny rubies winked along its length like droplets of blood. She held it up, questioning. Elora nodded once. The woman draped the jewelry around her neck, the cool metal settling in the hollow of her throat. A matching pair of bracelets encircled her wrists. Though lighter than the shackles, they felt no less symbolic. The women stepped back, bowed, and glided out, leaving a faint scent of sandalwood. As soon as the door shut, Elora crossed to the nightstand and examined the orchid again. A few petals had started to curl at the edges. She stroked them absently, wondering if the flower had grown on this scorched mountain or been brought from some lush valley beyond. Either way, its life here felt as precarious as her own. The latch scraped once more. A captain of the guard entered, flanked by 2 soldiers. He inclined his head, polite but distant. "The Lord requests your presence." She steeled her spine, following them into the corridor. Shadows undulated over the walls where lava flowed behind crystal panes. The heat rose in waves, carrying an undercurrent of ash that clung to the back of her throat. At each turn, iron gates waited, opening with a grating groan and slamming shut behind her. The path felt deliberately winding, no straight line she might retrace alone. They reached a pair of burnished bronze doors etched with intertwining dragons, tails knotted together at the center. The captain pushed one door inward and gestured. "Enter." Elora stepped into a vast circular hall. A domed ceiling soared overhead, ribbed with dark stone. Brazier fire bathed everything in shifting amber. At the chamber's heart, a raised dais held an altar carved from obsidian, etched with runes that glimmered red. Upon the altar rested a ceremonial dagger, slender, double-edged, its pommel set with a single ruby. The blade seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. A scatter of petals dusted the floor, white against black. High-set windows revealed a slice of indigo sky streaked with volcanic smoke. The guards remained outside. The door thunked shut. Alone again, Elora inched closer to the altar. Instinct warned her back, yet the dagger's pull felt magnetic. She reached out, fingertips brushing the hilt. The metal thrummed beneath her skin. Alive. Shadows flared, then subsided. She lifted the blade, surprised by its lightness despite the wide fuller down its center. Tiny characters glowed along the edge, too archaic to read. But she understood the promise they whispered. Blood answers blood. Boots scuffed behind her. She spun, hiding the dagger in the folds of her robe. Rhaegar emerged from a side passage dressed in black trousers and an open doublet that bared half his chest, bronzed skin patterned with faint scales. No armor, no crown. Still, presence alone made him formidable. He paused at the bottom of the dais steps, eyes sliding from Elora's face to the altar behind her. "You were meant to meditate here," he said, voice low, "not steal from it." She forced calm into her stance. Shouldn't a bride choose her own token for the ceremony? One dark brow arched. Perhaps, but generally not a weapon. Rhaegar climbed a step. Elora retreated, blade hidden at her side. Mist rose from the heated floor in curls, edging him in wavering light. His gaze flicked to her clenched fist beneath the robe. He wasn't fooled, only watching, assessing each breath she drew. "I thought the day would grant me more time," he said quietly. "Kings prefer fanfare and speeches. They promised a formal escort at dawn. Yet here you stand, already before me. My stepmother never enjoyed prolonging things." Bitterness tightened Elora's throat. "She likes her victories quick." He eyed her for a lingering moment, then inclined his head, acknowledging understanding, or perhaps sorrow. "You still tremble." She lifted her chin, perhaps from disgust that this tradition persists. His mouth curved, sad, not mocking. "I despise it too. It began as penance, then became routine. Mortals found comfort in rituals, even cruel ones, and I—" He exhaled, jaw flexing. "I lost the strength to refuse." Elora tightened her grip on the dagger. "You could end it. Spare every maiden who comes after me. And condemn thousands to fire," he murmured. Do you think those kings would not wage war the instant fear vanished? Maybe fear shouldn't rule either of us. Something bright flickered behind his eyes like a spark coaxed by wind. He stepped closer. Elora's pulse stuttered. She weighed distances, angles. If she struck true, would his heart be where a man's heart should be? She remembered the maid's whispers of black iron claws, the villagers' gossip, Marissa's glee. They called him monster, but monsters didn't break chains from a captive's wrists. Rhaegar reached the dais' top step. Heat emanated from him, warming her cheeks. "Your name means torch," he said softly. "Did you know?" "No." "Appropriate." He lifted one hand slowly, giving her time to retreat. Fingertips brushed a stray hair from her shoulder. "You burn with anger, with life." Elora swallowed hard. The dagger trembled, slicking her palm with nervous sweat. Now, her mind hissed. End this, run. She saw her stepmother's triumphant smile, heard Aldrich's hollow blessing. Remember your duty. For a moment the weapon felt righteous. Rhaegar's touch fell away. "I will not force vows on you tonight," he said. "Rest until dawn. Then we speak truly. Of curses, of prophecy, of choices still yours to make." He turned, exposing his unguarded spine. The gesture was either trust or fatal arrogance. Elora lunged. The dagger flashed like a captured star, arcing toward the ridgeline of his shoulder blade. But Rhaegar spun with impossible speed, hand snapping up to trap her wrist. The blade halted a hair from his throat. Gold flared in his eyes, brighter than forge fire. Her heart crashed against her ribs. She strained to push forward, but his grip was iron. Scales flowed across his arms, shimmering black-green. Under her fingers, his skin hardened, unbreakable. His voice was a low thunder. "So easily they taught you to kill." "They taught me to survive," she spat. He wrenched the dagger from her grasp and tossed it. The weapon clanged across the floor, skittering out of reach. With a swift movement, he twisted her arm behind her back and pressed her chest first against a carved pillar. Heat bled through the silk where his body caged hers. She felt the strength in him, something primeval, vast as a storm, and yet the pressure never crossed into pain. "Elora," he said near her ear, breath scorching. "Listen." She struggled once, futile. "Let me go." "Not until you understand." His free hand braced the pillar beside her head, claws half-formed at his fingertips. "If I die by your hand, the curse binds to you next. My fire becomes yours. It will burn from the inside out." She stiffened. "You lie." "I wish I did." His voice cracked like splitting stone. "You are brave, but not ready for such flames." "Then break the curse another way. That is why you are here." He drew back slightly, loosening his grip. "Because your life and mine intertwine." Silence throbbed around them, filled by the mountain's slow rumble. Elora turned her head enough to glimpse him. Gold flecks swirled in his eyes, illuminating pain so deep she almost dropped her guard. She whispered, "I never asked for your fate." "I never asked for betrayal," he answered. "Yet both found us." Suddenly aware of their closeness, she pushed against him. He released her and stepped back. Scales receded, leaving only bronzed skin, though his eyes still glowed. She faced him fully. "So what now? Keep me locked away until 10 years pass and they deliver another girl?" "No." His sigh carried centuries. "This ends one way or another before midwinter. By then the prophecy demands a choice." He retrieved the dagger, sliding it onto the altar with a metallic sigh. "Until that night, you remain under my protection, and I under yours." Elora's laughter escaped, sharp-edged. "Protection, you're the dragon." "Dragons can bleed." He wiped his palm across the runes, smearing a faint sheen of his own blood from where the blade nicked him. "And they can mourn." Torches guttered, casting the hall into deeper shadow. Wind howled through a vent high above, scattering petals. The orchid in Elora's hair slipped loose, falling between them. It hit the stone silently, petals already browning at the edges. Rhaegar lifted it, turning the wilted bloom in his fingers. Beauty fades quickly here. Is that a threat? A truth. He placed the flower on the altar beside the dagger. But some things rise again from ash. Thunder rumbled beneath their feet, a warning from the mountain's core. Flames surged higher in the braziers, sending heat waves rippling across the chamber. Rhaegar's eyes brightened, ignited by the reflected glow. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a hoarse whisper only she could hear. You think killing me will save you, foolish girl, you're already mine. Your fate and mine are one. Kill me, and you end yourself. He leaned in, breath hot on her cheek, scales flickering beneath his skin like living armor. Welcome to your curse, Elora. You'll learn to live with it, or burn trying. The mountain roared and every torch flared white-hot, plunging the room into a blinding storm of sparks just as his words struck home. Elora's gasp caught when the floor trembled, sending the dagger clattering against stone again. Heat rushed between them, raw, consuming, as if the prophecy itself had awakened, hungry for their next move. And in that heartbeat of glaring fire, when she could see nothing but his blazing eyes and feel nothing but the staggering force of their bond, Elora realized the truth he had spoken. She was bound to him, whether by blood, by curse, or by the impossible fire gathering in her chest. The flames dimmed as quickly as they rose, leaving crackling embers and thick swirling smoke. Rhaegar's silhouette loomed, unbroken, impossibly steady. Elora, he murmured, voice rumbling like distant thunder. Choose wisely what you set ablaze. The smoke curled between them, swallowing the last of the light, and the chapter's final echoes hung in the dark hall, promising either salvation or ruin, forged in fire and bound by ashes. Morning crept in like a kept secret, sliding pale light along the edge of the heavy drapes until it brushed Elora's cheek. She woke in stages, every breath carrying memories from the night before. Scales glinting beneath Rhaegar's skin, the press of his voice at her ear, the jarring knowledge that her attempt to kill him had failed in ways beyond simple defeat. For one suspended instant she lay perfectly still, trying to decide whether she was relieved or ashamed that she was alive at all. Then the unfamiliar hush of the chamber insisted on her attention, nudging her upright. Silk sheets pooled around her waist, too fine for comfort, almost mocking in their softness. She ran her fingertips over the patterns stitched across the duvet, dragons twisting among stylized flames, then drew her knees to her chest. The robe she'd worn yesterday lay draped over a low stool, the ruby chain still resting in its folds. Rhaegar had removed her shackles, yet she felt the weight of invisible links tugging at her mind. Inhaling a steadying breath, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, toes curling against the warm rug. Somewhere deep within the mountain, magma flowed in unseen rivers, keeping every surface comfortably heated. It shouldn't have felt pleasant. It did. She crossed to the high windows and pulled the curtains apart. Beyond the thick glass, the world looked foreign, volcanic ridges etched in charcoal lines against a sky bruised violet. Ash drifted like lazy snow, catching sunlight in silver sparks before sinking out of sight. Elora pressed her palm to the pane, half expecting the glass to burn her. Instead, it offered a mild warmth, as if everything in this fortress had gathered the mountain's heartfire into itself. You can't cage smoke, she whispered to her reflection, but the glass only showed a girl caught between exhaustion and steely resolve, hair escaping its braids, eyes ringed by sleepless shadows. She dressed quickly in a fresh gown folded on a cedar chest, soft linen the color of moonlight. When she tugged the laces tight, she discovered no fastenings at the back that required another's help, a curiously thoughtful choice. Still uneasy, she plaited her hair into a single loose braid and tucked stray wisps behind her ears, then scanned the room one more time. No chains, no guards. only an ornate door with an iron handle. Cautiously, she tried it. The latch gave. Her pulse leaped. She eased the door open onto a quiet corridor lit by wall sconces of iron shaped into talons. The stone floor gleamed obsidian, and vents near the ceiling vented curls of warm air that smelled faintly of mineral salt. She slipped out, surprised the hall was empty, and padded toward the first junction. Each step echoed softly, as though the mountain cushioned sound beneath layers of heated breath. Choosing a direction at random, she followed a passage arching past giant bas-reliefs, dragons coiled around human figures in eternal dance, scales picked out in obsidian shards that caught the torchlight. A shiver traced her spine, not of fear but of uncanny awe. The fortress was equal parts art and imprisonment, its silent grandeur neither welcoming nor overtly hostile, simply watching. The corridor opened into a balcony overlooking an interior chasm, where lava rolled sluggishly far below. A stone bridge spanned the gap, its side rails sculpted into interlocking dragons. The heat rising from the depths kissed her face and left a metallic taste on her tongue. She contemplated the bridge, noted the single guard posted at the far end, armor reflecting orange glow, and turned away before he saw her. Backtracking, she nearly collided with a young servant carrying a silver tray stacked with folded linens. The girl gasped, nearly dropping her burden. Elora steadied the pile with quick hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to startle you." The servant's eyes darted everywhere except Elora's face. I beg pardon, my lady. You're not meant to roam without escort." "My lady?" The title startled her after years of Marissa's barbed derision. "I'm no lady here, just Elora. Do you know where I might find something to eat? And perhaps directions back to—" She realized she didn't know what to call her own quarters. "The room I came from." The girl swallowed. "The kitchens lie 2 levels down the north spiral, but you shouldn't go alone. The master wouldn't be pleased." "The master?" Elora repeated. "Do you all fear him?" Color drained from the girl's cheeks. "He keeps us safe. That is enough." She gathered her linens as if drawing armor around herself. "If you're hungry, I can send a platter." Elora softened her voice. "Thank you. I'd prefer plain bread, maybe fruit if there is any, and water." She hesitated. "What's your name?" The servant's eyes widened. "We're not supposed to—" "I won't tell anyone." Elora offered a faint smile. "I won't be here forever. A name is a small comfort." The girl glanced over her shoulder, then whispered, "My name is Corin." "Corin." Elora felt the word settle into her memory like a fragile seed. "It's good to meet you." Corin gave a nervous nod, whispered something about returning soon, and hurried away, footsteps tapping down the hall until they vanished into the fortress's hum. Elora exhaled. Even here, kindness came wrapped in fear. She wandered a little longer, memorizing turns, noting statues, counting doors. Every corridor seemed designed to curve back on itself, making orientation slippery. When she found another balcony, she searched for landmarks in the view beyond the window. Twin peaks knifing the horizon, a plume of sulfuric steam, only to realize those markers shifted as she changed levels, as if the entire fortress was built in spirals that ascended and descended in irregular patterns. Escape without guidance would be nearly impossible. Footsteps approached behind her, measured, booted, heavy. She turned just as a man emerged from a side corridor, a steward perhaps, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dark livery. His eyes flicked to her side, where a guard might stand, then back to her. "Lady Elora," he said, bowing. "Forgive the intrusion. Lord Rhaegar requests your presence in the East Library when you are ready." "He requests?" The word surprised her. "Not commands?" "He rarely commands guests." The steward's tone suggested the nuance was important. "May I escort you?" She weighed the offer and nodded. "I'd appreciate it. These halls feel like a maze." "They are." he said simply, then turned, expecting her to follow. They walked in silence for several minutes, passing archways that opened to furnace rooms glowing red and quieter alcoves lined with fountains of clear water trickling into stone basins. At last, they reached a tall door etched with copper dragons chasing each other across its surface. The steward pressed a hand to the latch. It swung open smoothly. Rows of shelves stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling painted in hues of soot and flame. Books bound in leather the color of old ember stood shoulder to shoulder with scrolls sealed by drips of wax. A hearth dominated one wall, flames dancing behind a grate shaped like intertwined wings. And at a long table of polished basalt, Rhaegar sat, one hand braced on a tome so ancient it seemed ready to crumble, the other resting against his temple. He looked up. Elora's breath stalled. In the full light of morning he seemed less myth, more painfully real. Tired lines etched the corners of his mouth, as if the night's turmoil had left marks beneath his skin. Still, his gaze held the same molten depth she remembered. She released the steward with a nod. He closed the doors, leaving them alone. Rhaegar rose. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't sure refusing was an option." It was. He tilted his head slightly, strands of dark hair brushing his brow. "Though this place can be persuasive." "Persuasive," she echoed with a dry laugh. "One word for it." Her eyes drifted to the open book. Rhaegar followed her gaze. Dragon curses and blood-bound prophecies, not cheerful reading. "Does any of it help?" She approached, fingertips brushing the rough parchment edge. "Or is it just a reminder?" "A bit of both." He motioned to a second chair upholstered in charcoal velvet. "Sit." She sat, smoothing her skirt, then looked him straight on. "Last night you said the curse would pass to me if I killed you." He folded his arms, expression shuddered. "Yes." "How? Why me?" "Because I'm the sacrifice? The prophecy's chosen maiden?" His jaw tightened. "The prophecy doesn't call you maiden, it calls you torchbearer." She frowned. "You said my name means torch." "It does." He leaned forward, resting forearms on the table. "The prophecy is older than the kingdom, older than my birth, though I've lived longer than any mortal kingdom standing now. It says the bound flame will pass to the hand that ends the dragon's suffering. Whether in mercy or violence, the wording is flexible." "Bound flame," she repeated softly. "You." He inclined his head. "Yes." "So if I had driven that dagger home, you would have inherited my curse," he finished quietly, meeting her eyes. "Fire in your veins until it devours you or breaks the world." She gripped the table's edge. "Why keep that from me before?" "Would it have stopped you?" "It might have." She searched his face. "You allowed me close enough to try again. Did you want it to happen?" A flicker of something, grief maybe, crossed his face. "I wanted a choice. I've been denied those for centuries. I hoped, foolishly, you might see a path other than death." Elora studied him, broad shoulders bent slightly as if weighed down, hands clasped as though steadying himself against invisible tremors. "What did your betrayer do?" she asked gently. He closed his eyes, lashes resting dark against his cheeks. "She feared dragons, feared me. But she loved power more than she feared monsters. She offered my name to an elder curse smith in exchange for dominion over her father's enemies. The curse was the craftsman's price. Bind the dragon to a mortal form, weaken him, and the wars would end." "And did they?" "For a time." He opened his eyes. "Until those enemies sensed weakness and returned. Her kingdom burned all the same." He exhaled. "She died praying for my forgiveness." Elora's pulse thudded with reluctant sympathy. "Did you forgive her?" "I spit fire over her tomb," he said softly. "Time tempered that rage. But forgiveness—" He shrugged. "Some wounds refuse to cauterize." She hesitated, then reached across the table, letting her fingertips brush the back of his hand. His skin was warm, nerves alive beneath. He flinched, but didn't move away. "If you're hoping I'm different," she said quietly, "I don't know if I am. I don't even know myself anymore." He turned his hand palm up, inviting her touch. Then we learned together. She left her fingers on his for a heartbeat, pulse against pulse, before sliding away, unsettled by the strength of her own response. "What now?" she asked. He exhaled, drawing back. "Now I teach you what the torchbearer may become, and you decide if destiny is a shackle or a sword." The doors opened abruptly. A kitchen steward entered, carrying a tray laden with bread, sliced fruit, and a pitcher of water. He glanced at Rhaegar with the respect shown to rulers and at Elora with quiet curiosity laced with something like hope. He set the tray down, bowed, and retreated without a word. Elora poured water into a stone cup, drank deeply. The crisp taste grounded her. Rhaegar watched. "The staff fear me, yet they stay. You asked a servant if they do. The answer is complicated. I feed them, shelter them, and keep war from their doors. Fear can coexist with loyalty." She swallowed another sip. "Loyalty built on fear isn't loyalty. What would you call it?" "Survival." His mouth curved ruefully. "Then perhaps survival is all any of us manage." She picked up a piece of bread, tore it in half, offered him a portion. He accepted, their fingers brushing crumbs free. They ate in companionable silence, and something inside Elora loosened, an uncoiling thread of tension she hadn't realized she carried. When the tray was empty, Rhaegar closed the ancient tome with a quiet thud. "You should rest. Today was heavy with truth." "I'd rather explore," she admitted. "Learn this place before it learns me." A ghost of amusement lit his eyes, curiosity sharper than fear. "Walk with me." They rose. He led her through arched doorways into corridors she hadn't seen, gallery halls lined with mosaics of stars, an indoor garden fed by geothermal vents where pale flowers glowed phosphorescent. Servants bowed as they passed, their gaze flicking from him to her with wary fascination. Rhaegar pointed out landmarks, the central furnace where weapon steel tempered, the scriptorium where scholars once charted lunar cycles to predict dragon flights. He spoke of centuries as if they were seasons, voice low, reverent for histories only he still remembered. Along the way they spoke of smaller things, her childhood memories of orchard blossoms, his fondness for the solitude of high cliffs at dawn. At times, they lapsed into silence, but it was no longer hostile. It felt, startlingly, like peace. When they emerged onto a courtyard ringed by obsidian pillars, the sky had deepened to late afternoon amber. A warm breeze carried hints of sulfur and pine. Shadows stretched long across the paving stones, patterned in dragon-scale motifs. Elora closed her eyes, letting the breeze lift strands of hair from her neck. "For a prison, it's almost beautiful." "Beauty and danger seldom part ways," he said, watching her. She opened her eyes to find him studying her face with intense softness that prickled her skin. Embarrassed, she turned toward a low wall and peered into the scorched valley beyond. The wind shifted, carrying a rumble, faint at first, then stronger. Rhaegar tensed beside her. "What is it?" she asked. He scanned the sky. "A storm in the mountain's heart," he murmured. "I feel its pull." She faced him. "Does that matter?" Instead of answering, he closed his eyes, muscle taut in his jaw. When he opened them again, a flicker of gold brightened the brown. He exhaled sharply. "Sometimes the mountain reminds me who rules whom." He pressed fingers to the bridge of his nose. "Will you excuse me a moment?" He stepped away toward a side arch. Concern stirred in Elora's chest. Instinct urged her to follow, but she hesitated, unsure of boundaries. Before she could decide, he disappeared through the archway, leaving her beneath a sky gone suddenly heavy with charcoal clouds. The courtyard emptied in a rush of startled footsteps the moment Rhaegar vanished through the archway. Elora lingered, uneasy. Wind chased a swirl of ash across the flagstones, gusting through the colonnade with a sigh that sounded too much like a warning. Something felt off, as if the mountain had taken a deeper breath. She pressed a palm to her chest, sensing the uneasy stutter of her own heartbeat. Minutes passed. No one returned. Finally, concern overrode caution. She crossed to the archway and peered into the torchlit corridor beyond. The passage bent left, lit by a thin line of flame set into the floor. A faint vibration tremored through the stone, subtle, like distant thunder muffled by earth. She listened, then turned toward the direction Rhaegar had gone. A servant rounded a corner ahead, face drawn taut with fear. He nearly collided with her. "My lady, you shouldn't be here," he hissed, glancing toward the far end of the hall. "Where is he?" she asked. "In the forge wing. The pulse has him again." The servant's hands shook. "If you value your life, keep back." "Elora," she reminded gently. He blinked, confused by her correction. "Elora," he repeated, then hurried past, clutching an oil lamp that bobbed wildly with his stride. Forge wing. She pushed forward, pulse pounding at her temples. The corridor dipped downward, heat intensifying with each step. At a bend, she glimpsed flicker-lit walls painted orange by fire. The hiss of quenching water echoed, followed by a heavy clang, metal against stone, then a guttural growl that vibrated through her bones. Servants scurried out of a wide archway ahead, faces pale, robes flapping. None dared glance back. Elora slowed as she neared the opening, heart hammering. The forge beyond glowed like a pocket of sun trapped inside the mountain. Pillars of black stone framed cavernous space where anvils sat abandoned and braziers spat sparks skyward. In the center, Rhaegar knelt on one knee, braced by a trembling hand against the floor. His other arm reached across his chest as if restraining pain only he could feel. Scales shimmered along his shoulders, crawling over skin in restless waves. Steam rose from his back where fabric tore beneath surfacing wings. "Stay back," he snarled without looking. Voice deeper, half-broken, it rumbled like distant quakes. An ember rolled from his mouth on the word back. Elora took one step inside. Heat washed over her, yet she didn't flinch. "Rhaegar." "Go." His head bowed, hair hanging loose, molten light glinting off horns that hadn't been there moments before. They sprouted along his temples, curving backward, half-formed. She swallowed against sudden dryness in her throat. What triggered it? He laughed, a sound cracked by agony. "The pulse. My temper. Does it matter? Leave." Scales rippled down his arms, melding with human skin at forearms before fading, only to flare again. Muscle bunched, stone under his hand scorched black. A glance at his profile revealed fangs indenting his lower lip from within. Blood tinged with sparks dripped onto the floor. Elora stepped closer. "You don't want to hurt anyone. I know that." A low growl answered. He lurched to his feet, stumbling, wings half-sprouted and skeletal, webbing flickering between existence and ash. He slammed a fist into a broken anvil, splitting it with a metallic shriek. Lava veins beneath the floor brightened in reply. Elora's pulse banged against her ribs. Smoke choked the air, but she edged forward anyway. "Look at me." Rhaegar's head jerked, eyes blazing molten gold. Recognition flickered, followed by panic. "I said leave." "No." She kept her tone steady, though her legs felt water-light. "You're not alone in this." He bared fangs. "Alone keeps you alive. Fear keeps you alone." She shot back. He recoiled as if struck by the truth of it. A wail ripped through him, half-roar, half-wordless grief. His knees buckled. Elora raced forward, catching his arm. Heat radiated off scales that pebbled his bicep. Pain lanced her palm, but she held on. Skin sizzled faintly where they touched, yet she gripped tighter, refusing to let go. Rhaegar snarled, twisting away, then froze when her other hand cupped his jaw. Flames mirrored in her eyes. His breathing hitched, muscles shaking. The wings sagged, collapsing into sparks that evaporated before touching ground. "Feel the stone under your feet," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "Feel the air in your lungs, the weight of my hands. Be here." His gaze darted across her face, looking for fear perhaps. She gave him none, only stubborn calm. He inhaled raggedly, horns receding beneath skin. The scales smoothed, retracting, until only scorched patches of cloth and sweat remained. When at last his breaths quieted, the forge's fire shrank as if the mountain exhaled relief through him. Silence settled, broken only by the tintinnabulation of cooling metal and the distant hiss of vents. Steam ghosted off his shoulders. He sagged forward, forehead brushing hers. She heard his heart, wild, then slowing, echoing inside his chest. "Why?" he rasped, breath hot on her cheek. "Do you stay?" She eased her burned hand from his arm, wincing, then rested it against his sternum. "Because beneath all this fire, you were alone. I know that feeling too well." He pulled back slightly, enough to look at her palm. Angry blisters bubbled across the skin. Anguish twisted his features. "You're hurt. I'll live." He swallowed. One trembling hand slid over hers. Cold returned where scales had been, and with it, a faint incandescent glow. A pulse rippled from his palm into hers, cool, tingling, like spring water washing over scorched ground. The burn faded to pink, the pain easing. She stared, speechless. "Dragon blood heals," he murmured, "when it chooses." He let go, trembling so hard his fingers shook. "Forgive me." "For what, fighting yourself?" She studied his face. "Or daring to trust someone else not to run?" He took a staggering step away as though distance might steady him. "You saw what I become. I saw what you were afraid to become." She moved forward again until inches separated them. "But you didn't lose control?" He scoffed. "Only because you risked yourself." "Not just me, you fought too." She lowered her gaze, remembering the seared imprint of scales under her hand. "Is that what desire does? Makes the curse worse?" He blinked, startled. Heat flared in his cheeks. "Who said anything about desire?" "Your confession earlier. Rage or desire, your words, not mine." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Finally, he exhaled. "That library conversation was reckless." "Maybe honesty always is." She tilted her head. "Tell me something else reckless." He stared, torn between caution and need, then said, "When you touched me, it rooted me to the present." The dragon obeyed. No mortal has ever done that. Her breath caught in her throat. "Good to know." He offered a broken laugh, then winced, pain reminding him of muscles torn mid-shift. She reached to steady him. He didn't resist. Together they left the forge's blistering heat, crossing back into cooler corridors. Servants peered from hiding spots, eyes wide, relief blooming as the pair passed without fire or smoke trailing them. At a small antechamber near the courtyard, Rhaegar slowed, leaning one shoulder against the wall. Elora guided him to a bench carved from dragon bone, smooth white arc that glowed faintly. She sat beside him, drawn by the gray pallor creeping over his face. "You heal others," she said, "but not yourself." "I heal," he corrected, "but the shift drains me. Larger wounds take time." Instinctively, she lifted his left hand. Minor cuts streaked across knuckles from striking the anvil. Without thinking, she brushed her lips lightly over torn skin. Heat flared under her cheeks, but she didn't pull back until the bleeding slowed. Meeting his gaze, she found him staring, astonished. Embarrassment surfaced. "Old folk remedy," she mumbled. A slow smile curved his mouth, gentle, almost shy. "It helps." She felt the sofa's smooth edge dig into her back and suddenly became aware of how narrow the bench was, of the way their knees touched. She stood quickly, I should find water for you. Stay, he said, the words soft yet carrying more power than a shouted command. He struggled to his feet before she could protest. I'm not fragile, merely tired. You nearly tore yourself apart. He half shrugged. And nearly torched you, yet here we are. Because we trusted each other for a moment. She folded her arms, needing distance that walls couldn't provide. When rage or desire comes again, will you trust me the same way? He lifted a hand, fingers hovering near her cheek without touching. That depends. Will you still see me? Or only the beast? She closed the space, letting his knuckles brush her jaw. I see the man fighting for his humanity. His thumb traced a path behind her ear, resting against the back of her neck. Then perhaps there is hope. They stood suspended in that fragile hush until Elora's stomach growled loudly enough to shatter the spell. She laughed in mild mortification. A grin cracked across Rhaegar's face, wider than she had yet seen, revealing a hint of fanged incisor still sharper than human teeth. The expression made him younger, boyish. For a beat, everything, prophecy, flames, curses, fell away. What, he asked, eyes dancing. I'm starving, she confessed, hand against her abdomen. He chuckled. Forgive me. I forget human needs when embers roar in my skull. He motioned to a passing servant, a slender man who carried a basket of folded towels. The servant bowed, eyes darting from the scorch marks on Rhaegar's torn tunic to Elora's flushed cheeks. See that the lady receives a meal in her chamber, Rhaegar instructed. Then he added, quieter, she will stay there for the evening, under protection. The servant nodded eagerly, eager to obey and retreat from the dangerous calm. He scurried off. Rhaegar turned toward Elora. You should rest, he said, though longing colored the words, as if he wished rest were a shared pursuit rather than solitude. She nodded, though part of her rebelled at leaving him alone after such torment. And you? He glanced down at his ruined shirt, tugging the fabric away from unhealed scorches. I'll survive. The mountain's forge isn't the only crucible to mend my wounds. She reached for his damaged sleeve. Let me help you change at least. He caught her wrist gently. Not yet. The light in his eyes dimmed to caution. I need solitude to master what remains of the shift. If you stayed, control might fray again. The words fell between them, heavy and undeniable. Desire, a curse trigger. She exhaled. Then I'll wait until you call. His fingers lingered longer than necessary before releasing her. Soon. They walked together until her corridor branched from the main passage. There, he paused. Torches painted overlapping shadows on his face. Elora, he said, voice a hush. I owe you more than I can name. Then live, she replied, and let me decide the rest. He bowed his head, then turned away. She watched him retreat until a corner swallowed his tall frame. Only then did she slip into her chamber. Corin had already placed a tray on the low table, assorted cheeses, honeyed figs, warm flatbread, a steaming bowl of spiced broth. Elora thanked her softly. The maid smiled, quick and nervous, and left. Alone, Elora poured water into a cup, staring at her reflection rippling on the surface. She could still feel Rhaegar's cheek under her palm, the thrum of dragon fire beneath his skin. The moment her lips had touched his torn knuckles, replayed again and again until heat climbed her neck. She pressed cold metal of the goblet to her forehead, trying to slow her thoughts. But thoughts ignored her commands. They tumbled in frantic loops. His pain, his gratitude, that near loss of control when desire coincided with shifting. The way his laughter sounded like embers popping in a hearth. The way he'd said soon. By the time she finished half the broth, dusk had settled, casting amethyst shadows through the window. She crawled into bed and lifted the duvet, only to freeze at the sight of an object resting on the pillow. A small pendant, obsidian carved into two interlocking flames, threaded on a delicate chain of dragon steel. A note lay beside it, ink scrawled in firm strokes. Wear this when you feel alone. It will guide me to you and perhaps remind you fire can warm as well as burn. Elora ran her thumb over the pendant's cool surface. It pulsed once against her fingertip, faint as a heartbeat. She slipped the chain around her neck, settling the weight between her collarbones. It warmed instantly, as if it knew her skin. Curling beneath the blankets, she closed her eyes and let exhaustion sweep through muscles and bone. But sleep tarried, withheld by a new awareness that tightened her chest. The bond was no longer a threat alone. It was a promise, uncertain and terrifyingly bright. She cupped the pendant, whispering a silent oath to herself and to whatever fate listened. "I won't run from the fire," she murmured, "not anymore." Slowly, lulled by distant forge rumbles and steady mountain rhythm, her breathing evened, and darkness wrapped her in dreams that smelled of cedar smoke, tasted of honeyed figs, and echoed with a dragon's broken laugh. Moonlight seeped through a narrow slit in the bedchamber wall, silvering the dust and turning every shadow into deep blue velvet. Elora surfaced from sleep gasping, her heart beating an urgent tattoo against her ribs. Flames still licked the edges of her dream, Marissa laughing while the manor's orchards burned, Aldrich staring through her as though she were smoke. She pushed herself upright and pressed a hand to her sternum. The pendant Rhaegar had given her lay hot against her skin, warmer than body heat, as though it pulsed with its own life. She tossed back the covers and swung her feet to the floor. Night's hush lay heavy, disturbed only by the occasional distant grind of stone as the mountain shifted. The pendant throbbed again, gentle but insistent. She slipped the chamber door open. The corridor torches had been dimmed to coals, casting a faint orange glow that barely reached the ceiling rafters. A breeze, smelling faintly of hot minerals, carried a distant clang, metal on stone, followed by silence. Curiosity tugged her forward. Barefoot, she padded down the hall, one hand brushing the wall for orientation. She passed the empty gallery where mosaics of starlight dragons reflected dim glints even in low light, then the quiet indoor garden, glowing faintly from bioluminescent blossoms. Each step cooled the pendant's warmth, like following a thread through a labyrinth until tug met source. At a tall arched doorway, the warmth flared. She pushed inside and found herself in the same library where they'd spoken earlier, though now its hearth had burned low to embers. Shadows curled around towering stacks. At the far window, Rhaegar stood, arms braced on the sill, the pale glow limbing his broad shoulders. He turned when she entered, eyes bright. Even in near darkness, their golden undertone glowed. "Elora," he said softly, voice rough as if woken from thought rather than sleep. "I didn't summon you." She lifted the pendant. "This did." His gaze dropped to the obsidian flames. "It responds when it senses distress." "I had a nightmare," she admitted, crossing the stone floor that had absorbed just enough heat to keep her toes from chilling. "Not about dragons, about my home." He gave a faint nod, hand gesturing toward a cushioned chaise near the hearth. She sat. He knelt to stoke the embers with an iron rod. Sparks spiraled upward, illuminating his profile, sharp lines softened by fatigue. When flames licked fresh wood, he settled across from her on a low footstool, folding long arms over his knees. "Tell me," he said, eyes never leaving hers. She picked at the fringe of her night shift sleeve. "Marissa torched the orchards. My father stood in the smoke and watched. I tried to reach him, but with each step I sank deeper into ash. I kept calling his name. He didn't hear." Her voice caught. "I woke choking." Rhaegar's hand twitched as though he meant to reach for her but thought better. "Nightmares borrow shapes we fear most. Fire is my oldest terror, too." "Fire?" Surprise flickered. She'd assumed fire was his ally, not his fear. He lowered his gaze. "The curse was forged in it. Flames remind me of shackles as much as strength." He rubbed a thumb across his opposite palm in a restless arc. I stood in a courtyard like this when I first lost control. Watched people I loved flee from me. Their faces haunted my dreams for decades. The fire popped. Elora leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You say shield them from war, but you also shield them from you, don't you? He met her gaze, acceptance mixing with sorrow. A dragon's mercy can still burn. I don't believe you want to burn, she said. His lips curved, sad and grateful. You believe in me quickly. Maybe because no one believed in me. She sighed, looking to the window where ash twirled under moonlight. My father disappeared behind Marissa's lies. When she offered me as tribute, he thought he was being noble. I keep wondering if I hated him or pitied him more. What answer have you found? She shook her head. None that settles. He stood, crossed the space, and sank onto the chaise beside her. The cushion dipped, bringing their shoulders close. Heat radiated from him, like from the hearth itself, but gentler. A steady warmth that coaxed away lingering chill. Your father sees through borrowed eyes, he said. I know what that blindness feels like. My betrayer convinced me her fear was love until fear won. You see clearly now, she said. Sometimes clarity comes too late. He angled toward her. But your clarity is new, still forming. Don't let bitterness carve it to pieces. She smoothed her braid against her shoulder. What do I do with the pieces I already have? Forge something new. His fingers brushed her wrist where the pendant chain disappeared into cloth. Dragon steel bends only with the hottest flame and the most patient hand. Hearts do too. The touch was light, almost accidental, yet a jolt ran up her arm. She lifted her gaze. Rhaegar, I don't see a monster, she whispered. I see a man fighting to remember himself. Something fierce and fragile sparked in his eyes like glass that had just cooled from molten. He inhaled, the breath snagging. You are the first to say that without trembling. She swallowed. My hands are steady even if my heart isn't. He smiled, a slow, hesitant curve. Steady hands can tame storms. The silence that followed was not awkward. It hummed with possibilities. The library's dim shapes seemed to lean closer, eavesdropping. Outside, the wind rose in a low sigh against the windows, as though the mountain itself exhaled. Rhaegar's hand remained on her wrist. He turned it palm up, tracing the healed skin where blister scars had nearly vanished. I still feel the moment you touched me in the forge, he murmured. A anchor thrown into raging sea. Her throat tightened. She covered his hand with her free one, letting their fingers weave. The gesture felt both daring and necessary. His shoulders eased, the tension of centuries sliding off inch by inch. He shifted, facing her fully. If desire can kindle the curse, he said softly, perhaps trust can quell it. Her pulse fluttered. Maybe both together can balance. He moved closer, the space between them down to a finger's breadth. She thought he meant to kiss her, every part of her braced for it. Yet he paused, gold eyes searching, asking without words. She mirrored his stillness. Want flickered through her, bright as forge sparks, but a sharper need guided one small action. She lifted his hand, pressing her lips to the center of his palm, the way she had kissed his knuckles hours before. The simple contact lit heat under her skin, though he made no move. When she lowered his hand, he exhaled shakily. You undo me, Elora. Not my aim. I know. He tapped a finger under her chin, gentle, tipping her face up. Which is why it happens. They stayed like that until the wind outside lulled. At length, Rhaegar rose. I should return you to your chamber before dawn steals what little rest remains. He offered his hand, palm turned upward in silent invitation. She placed her fingers in his grip closed warmly around them. They walked the corridors without hurry. Lamps guttered low. Once, their shoulders brushed, and he didn't pull away. A servant, half asleep, passed and halted, eyes widening at their clasped hands. Rhaegar inclined his head. The servant scurried off, no doubt to whisper. At her door he released her fingers but kept her gaze. Moonlight cut across the hall, framing him in silver and copper hues. She reached up, resting her palm against his chest where the faint beat of his heart echoed. "I don't fear the dragon," she said. "And I," he whispered, hand covering hers, "fear losing what humanity you reflect back at me." She rose onto her toes, brushing her cheek against his for the barest second, enough to feel stubble and warmth, to breathe ash and cedar. His breath caught, chest rising beneath her palm. She stepped back before either barrier or caution collapsed. "Good night, Rhaegar." "Good night, Elora." He watched her disappear inside before turning away, stride measured, shoulders squared, as if braced for battles within as much as beyond. Elora shut the door quietly. The room felt different. Less cage, more cocoon. She leaned against the panel, fingers tracing the pendant. It no longer burned. It throbbed soothingly, mirroring her heartbeat. She crossed to the window. Stars glittered through thinning ash, constellations she didn't recognize. Somewhere in the fortress, stone scraped as Rhaegar's presence retreated to solitary corridors. Pulling the chain free, she let the pendant rest over the linen of her nightdress, just above her thudding heart. She thought of trust and desire, rage and quiet. In her mind, Marissa's poisoned words withered. Aldrich's distance shrank to a shadow against this new unfolding horizon. Sleep came gently this time. It found her curled on her side, pendant aglow, a half-smile, lingering. She dreamed of walking through fire without pain, hand in hand with a man whose laughter no longer cracked, only warmed. Far below, the mountain's pulse slowed, soothed by a balance it hadn't felt in ages. Sunlight spilled across the chamber's polished floor in soft ripples, as if it hesitated to disturb the quiet. Elora drifted awake on a breath scented faintly with cedar smoke and the lingering spice of last night's hearth. Her eyes opened to the familiar mosaic of obsidian dragons carved into the ceiling, but everything felt subtly altered, lighter, alive with possibility. She lay still, letting the warmth seep into her bones, replaying those twilight hours in the library. The hush of turning pages, Rhaegar's voice carrying the weight of centuries, the softness in his eyes when he kissed her as though afraid the moment itself might shatter. She pressed her fingers to her lips, half expecting heat to rise from skin, half fearing it wouldn't, and found a shy smile instead of flames. The pendant at her throat had cooled to a gentle throb that matched her pulse, a reminder that the night had been real, that trust had sprouted in soil she once thought scorched beyond hope. A quiet knock pulled her into motion. She slipped from bed, smoothing the folds of a simple dove-gray gown someone had set on a chair. When she cracked the door, Corrin stood waiting, cheeks pink as dawn. The young servant bobbed her head, eyes darting between Elora's face and the pendant that glimmered in morning light. "Good day," Corrin whispered. "Lord Rhaegar invites you to breakfast. He said you should see the sun across the ash plain." Invites. Elora's heart fluttered. "Thank you, Corrin. Give me a moment." She braided her hair quickly, hands trembling less from nerves than from eagerness. As she followed Corrin through quiet corridors, the fortress felt changed. Torches burned brighter, air carried a whisper of excitement, as if stone walls had overheard her secret and conspired to keep it safe. Servants they passed bowed deeper than before, offering small smiles rather than muted fear. It made her step lighter, yet guilt pricked. One night had granted her gentler paths, while villagers outside still lived under Marissa's shadow. She wouldn't forget. Corrin stopped before a pair of iron-framed doors that opened onto a narrow terrace. Heated breeze brushed Elora's cheeks as she stepped outside. The world below spread in layers of dusky red and umber, lava flows cooling into black rivers against slopes dusted in silver ash. Beyond the hazy horizon, peaks rose like dragon spines silhouetted against a watercolor sky. Rhaegar waited beside a low table set with simple fare dates, warm bread, a pot of steaming herb tea. He wore a loose, dark shirt unlaced at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Morning light caught faint scales still lingering along his forearms like memories of the night's turmoil. When he turned, the warmth in his smile eclipsed the sunlight. "I was starting to fear I'd eaten all the bread," he said. A laugh escaped her, surprised and free. "And leave me to starve? I doubt that. Never intentionally." He gestured to a cushioned bench opposite his. "Join me before the breeze steals the warmth." She sat, noticing a mug already waiting where he must have known she would choose. Steam curled up, carrying mint and something citrus. He poured tea into her cup before his own, fingers steady, as though small courtesies grounded him against deeper tremors. They ate a date each in companionable silence. It felt natural to speak quietly here, as if the mountains themselves listened. "Tell me a memory," he said, tearing bread and passing her half. "Something before this place, before your stepmother wove shadows." She smiled, licking honey from her thumb. "When I was 7, I raced my father through our orchard rows at dusk. The blossoms were falling, and he said if I caught one mid-air, I'd keep its wish. I jumped, caught 2, gave him one of the wishes." Her smile faltered. "I don't think either came true." Rhaegar considered her. "Perhaps they still can. Wishes can be stubborn things." "And you?" she asked. "Before betrayal?" His gaze slid to the horizon. There was a cliff overlooking the southern sea. Dragons would dive at sunrise, skimming waves until the surf turned gold beneath their wings. I would join them, feel the spray, cool scales still warm from dawn's fire. He paused. "I haven't flown like that since." Elora pictured him soaring above breaking waves, shadow and flame, greeting morning, and her breath caught with unexpected yearning. Part for him, part for the world stolen by fear. She reached across the table, brushing the back of his hand. He flipped his palm, letting fingers entwine with hers for a quiet heartbeat. The terrace door banged open, a guard bowed, armor clinking. "My lord, an urgent report." Rhaegar's fingers tensed around hers before he released. "Speak." "Riders sighted on the lower pass, Lord Aldrich's colors, nearly 50 men." The tea turned ash bitter in Elora's mouth. "He came," she murmured. The guard's gaze flicked to her, pity and hesitation entwined. "The lead messenger claims they are here to negotiate your release, my lady." She almost laughed at the absurdity. Marissa's lies traveled faster than truth. Rhaegar rose, shoulders broadening as if he absorbed the news into muscle and bone. The guard bowed again and retreated. Rhaegar poured fresh tea, no longer calm. The liquid trembled in the spout. This was sooner than expected. "Elora," he stepped to the rail, gripping the stone. "If they fire on the fortress, lives will be lost." "My father isn't a warmonger," she said, though doubt crept in. "Marissa twists his view, but perhaps I can untwist it." Rhaegar's jaw flexed. "He'll see you as hostage. Then let him see I'm not." He faced her fully, heat simmering in his eyes. "You wish to stand before arrows and spears?" "I wish to stand before my father," she said, voice steady. "I can't hide behind walls while war brews on my name." He stepped closer. "Your courage both terrifies and heals me. And your trust gives mine strength." He exhaled, lifting her fingers to his lips for a fleeting kiss. "Finish eating," he said, attempting calm. "We'll need every scrap of strength." She swallowed the rest of her bread even as appetite vanished, sensing that breakfast's sweetness belonged to a different morning born only minutes ago. They left the terrace through quieter halls. Servants pressed themselves to walls, whispering prayers or rumors Elora couldn't catch. Rhaegar paused at a branching corridor. "I must ready the sentries. Meet me in the West Library when you've gathered your thoughts." Without waiting for agreement, he strode off, cloak swirling like shadow clinging to flame. Elora watched until he disappeared, heart battering her ribs. Then she walked alone, mind thundering with images of Aldrich's stern face and Marissa's cold smile. Passing a polished shield hung for decoration, she saw her reflection, eyes anxious yet alight with something fierce. She straightened her spine. No one would tell her story today. She would speak it herself. Corin appeared with a fresh shawl. Take this. The wind on the wall is sharp. And your pendant. Hold it if fear creeps in. It glows brighter the braver your heart. Elora clasped Corin's hands. Thank you. When this is over, I hope you'll show me that orchard of crystal flowers. Only if you promise not to leave us, Corin whispered. Elora hesitated. I promise to return, she said, realizing how true the words felt. Hold the fortress until then. She hurried toward the west wing, pendant warming like a heartbeat leading her on. Elora found the west library hushed as a church of stone and ember. High above, colored panes cast molten streaks across geometric floor tiles, while soot-dark beams arched like ribs overhead. She paused, listening. No footfalls, no echo but her breathing, and realized how easily the fortress swallowed sound. In that quiet, doubt stretched its claws. What if the prophecy demanded more than she could give? What if her presence worsened everything? She closed her eyes, pressing thumb and forefinger to the warm pendant. Its steady pulse calmed the tremor building in her chest. A door hidden behind a tapestry parted with a soft rasp. Rhaegar emerged, rolling his sleeves as though he'd shoveled 10 tons of memory. His hair, still loose from morning breeze, framed eyes burnished by determination and worry. He crossed to her in 3 strides. I was delayed, he said, voice low. A dozen preparations, none with certain outcome. I'm here, she replied. He studied her face, searching for fear. Whatever he saw steadied him. With a small nod, he motioned for her to follow through the hidden door. The passage beyond angled sharply downward, lit by torches guttering blue. At each turn, sigils inscribed in dragon tongue glowed faintly, and the air grew warm enough to redden skin. Finally, they reached a circular chamber carved from charred basalt. Bookshelves hugged the walls, but the focus was a stone pedestal at the center where a scroll lay unfurled, its parchment shimmering faint silver. Rhaegar gestured to the pedestal. The prophecy. Elora stepped forward. The scroll's edges drifted as if stirred by an unseen breeze. Intricate script spiraled around an illustration. A dragon knotted in chains of thorny vines. A woman cloaked in flame holding a torch that bled both light and darkness. The ink gleamed like starlight captured in water. He began translating, voice steady but quiet, as though each word carried fragile weight. The dragon bound in chains of blood and betrayal shall find release only within the willing heart of Flame's bearer. Yet when heart ignites heart, the world must bend, toward dawn or dusk, decided by love, sealed by sacrifice. He paused, exhaling slowly, then continued. Should the bearer's love hold steadfast, dragon and flame shall forge peace reborn. Should fear fracture love, fire will consume, first hearts, then kingdoms. Silence filled the chamber thicker than smoke. Elora ran fingertips along a border of minuscule dragon glyphs. They glimmered, warming skin. Rhaegar spoke into that hush. For centuries I prayed the bearer would never appear. I feared any bond would doom both of us. She lifted her gaze. But I'm here now. Yes. He braced hands on the pedestal. And each hour since you arrived, the curse has stirred more violently, because my heart is no longer stone, Elora. It beats where I once thought it dead, and the fire inside answers. Her pulse answered too, racing. And if the prophecy is right, our bond will decide salvation or ruin. He met her eyes. I would spare you that burden if I could, but fate, it's a forge hotter than lava. She reached across the scroll, resting her hand over his. I choose whether I stay, not fate, and I'm still here. His shoulders slackened, relief and fear woven together. I don't deserve that faith. She squeezed his fingers. Maybe neither of us needs to deserve. We simply need to choose." He inhaled as though her words drew fresh air into centuries-stagnant lungs. Moving slowly, he circled the pedestal until they stood inches apart. The scroll's glow reflecting in both pairs of eyes. He raised a hand, fingertips ghosting along the curve of her jawline, giving her a chance to retreat. She didn't. Heat blossomed where he touched, not scorching but alive. Steady as heartbeat, echo of pendant. Their breaths tangled. Rhaegar's thumb traced the hollow behind her ear. "If love fuels the curse, we tread dangerous ground. Then teach me to dance on embers." A soft laugh escaped him, part wonder, part surrender. He tilted his forehead to hers. She felt the thrumming engine of dragonfire beneath his skin, yet the warmth soothed rather than seared. "Tell me you're certain," he whispered. "I'm terrified," she answered, honest and clear. But certainty feels overrated compared to trust. His lips parted in a shaky smile before brushing hers, light as ash, tentative. She rose on toes, meeting the kiss with equal gentleness, and sparks skittered along nerves. A hush welled up, like the fortress held its breath, every molten vein, listening. When their lips met again, the kiss deepened, slow and reverent. She traced the nape of his neck, where human skin met faint ridge of scales. He trembled, but neither horn nor claw emerged, only warmth. When they broke apart, her breath came fast. Gold flared in his irises, bright but controlled. He rested his brow against hers. "You steady the fire." "And you set mine alight," she said, voice ragged but calm. He chuckled softly, but worry etched lines at his eyes. "Strong emotion accelerates everything. We must learn balance." "Then we start now." A sudden knock cracked the chamber door. Rhaegar straightened, tension snapping back. Elora's heart lurched, heat and vulnerability retreating behind ribs. A guard entered, bowing low. "Forgive intrusion. Scouts report Lord Aldrich's party has reached the Sulphur Bridge. His herald requests parley under banner of peace." Rhaegar's jaw flexed. "Prepare the outer courtyard, minimal arms displayed. I'll speak with Elora before we respond." The guard bowed and left. Alone again, Elora steadied herself. The bridge is narrow. If swords are drawn, many could fall. "I'll ensure it doesn't reach that," he said. He wrapped her fingers in his, gaze darkening with protective resolve. "But you should not face him alone." "I must." She smoothed his sleeve where muscles tensed beneath cloth. "If my father sees you first, he'll see threat before truth." He closed his eyes briefly, fighting an argument he feared would patronize her. When he opened them, resolve replaced worry. "Then I stand near, hidden until you call." She nodded. "We speak truth. That's all." "I pray truth proves stronger than fear." He tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, then released her hand. Together, they climbed the spiraling corridor. Along the way, messengers hustled, clamor echoing. Elora caught snatches of talk. Archers stationed on western turrets, healers preparing infirmary rooms, servants lighting extra torches against oncoming dusk. Yet an undercurrent of hope rippled. The master walks calmer today. The lady talks to him like sunrise touches stone. They paused at an armory alcove where Rhaegar shed his dark shirt, exchanging it for leather, reinforced with scaled plating at shoulders. He caught Elora watching, and offered half a smile. "Symbolic only. My skin is stronger." "I know," she said, but the sight of him armoring stirred both comfort and unease. He strapped a curved dagger to his belt, obsidian blade etched with runes, and glanced at her plain gown. Silence communicated what he wouldn't say. She bore no armor. She lifted the pendant in silent reply. "It may not stop arrows," he murmured. "It stops me from fleeing," she said. "That matters more." A faint roar rumbled through the walls, distant magma shifting. He guided her onward to a tall pair of bronze doors crested with dragon motifs. Guards swung them open to reveal a vast courtyard built into the mountain's face. Evening shadow crept across stone parapets while volcanic light painted clouds in shades of blood orange. At the far rim, a narrow bridge arched over a steaming ravine. On its opposite side, 50 riders clustered among banners emblazoned with Dalcair colors, 2 silver crescents on a field of green. Elora's breath hitched. She recognized the black warhorse at the front, recognized too the man atop it, though distance blurred features. Lord Aldrich sat straight-backed, armor polished, but plain. Rhaegar guided her to a vantage near the bridge entrance, his presence a steady heat at her left shoulder, though he remained 1 pace behind shadow. Sentries lined the walls overhead, bows unstrung to show restraint yet ready if peace broke. A lone herald rode to the midpoint, voice amplified by mountain acoustics. "We come for Lady Elora of House Dalcair. Release her, and no blood will stain this day." Elora stepped forward, pulse thrumming. The breeze snapped her shawl. Across the ravine, Aldrich removed his helmet, revealing hair more gray than brown. Eyes rimmed red. Marissa sat astride a pale mare just behind him, cloaked in regal crimson. Even at a distance, Elora felt the chill in her stepmother's gaze. The herald called again, impatience lacing tone. "Our lord demands proof the lady lives." Elora raised her voice, praying it would carry true. "I live." Gasps traveled down the enemy line. Aldrich leaned toward Marissa, hissing words lost to distance. Elora took another step, hands open. "I am not held captive," she said. "I choose to remain." Aldrich urged his horse forward until hooves clanged on the bridge's first stones. "Elora," he called, pain raw in 2 syllables. "Step aside, child. We've come to take you home." Home. The word cut deeper than arrow. "My home burned long before dragons, father." Marissa saw to that. He flinched. Marissa's lips tightened. She nudged her horse alongside Aldrich's, voice pitched to carry. "This fortress twists minds with dark magic. See how your daughter speaks against us?" Elora felt Rhaegar's tension rise. She reached behind, squeezing his hand, a silent plea for restraint. He eased, those scales rippled beneath his collar. "I speak only what's true," Elora called. "And I beg for peace. Lay down arms, cross unarmed, and meet me. We can speak without swords." Marissa laughed, a brittle sound. "So the dragon teaches courtesy now?" Elora ignored her. "Father, please, no one must be hurt." Aldrich looked up, really looked, perhaps for first time since offering her up 10 years prior. He studied her posture, her clear gaze, the absence of chains. Conflict pinched his brow. Rhaegar moved up beside Elora, still half in shadow, voice low. "He might listen if I show respect." She nodded, though her stomach lurched with fear of misstep. Rhaegar stepped into full view. Gasps rippled across the riders. Even from afar, his presence commanded awe. Tall, broad, eyes reflecting faint gold. Yet he bowed, one hand across chest, the gesture formal. "Lord Dalcair," he said, voice carrying calm steel, "I swear upon ancient flame your daughter has suffered no harm. She is under my protection and free will." Aldrich's eyes flicked to Marissa, who spat words Elora couldn't hear. The soldiers tightened formation, tension coiling. Elora reached forward, but Rhaegar's hand caught her wrist, subtle, grounding. In that moment, torchlight flared as the sun dipped behind peaks, casting her silhouette across the bridge. She faced the father who once raced her beneath blooming boughs now long burned. Heart hammering, she drew breath. Ready to break the spell Marissa wove, ready to speak from love, not fear. Behind her, Rhaegar's voice passed like warm wind. "You're not alone." She believed him. Elora stepped to the very edge of the parapet where the stone tapered, boots inches from the yawning gap that fell to steam and molten glow. Wind lifted strands of her hair, tossing them across her cheeks. A hush spread among the riders on the opposite side, as if her small figure alone held them at bay. She drew a breath that tasted of ash and mountain air, and projected her voice using everything the fortress's acoustics would grant her. "Father," she called, steady though her pulse hammered, "look at me. No chains, no bruises, no fear. The man beside me saved me from a fate you once believed would protect the realm. I ask you now, protect it with me, rather than against us." Aldric's helm hung at his side, gauntleted knuckles white around its rim, his brow furrowed, gaze flicking from her face to Rhaegar's towering presence. Marissa whispered in his ear, disdain carved into every elegant line of her mouth. Even from the fortress wall, Elora could read the story in those lips. A dragon's thrall, a cursed seduction, the enemy at the gate. She felt Marissa's poison curling through Aldric's mind, and anger stirred, steady, deliberate like the heat beneath stone waiting to burst. Rhaegar's hand pressed lightly to Elora's back, grounding without claiming. Gold glimmered in his pupils, but his voice stayed level. "Lord Dalcair, I give my word, and dragon word is no small oath, that your daughter has chosen her path freely. Let us speak without steel between us." An uneasy murmur rippled among the soldiers. Some shifted, uncertain, while others stared at Rhaegar as if he might sprout wings any moment. Aldric cleared his throat. "Words from a monster mean little to men whose villages remember flame," he shouted. "I am a monster where monsters are made," Rhaegar returned, not flinching, "but I choose today what burns and what does not." Marissa snorted, voice carrying like cracked crystal. "Listen to him spin tales, my lord. Elora stands under enchantment. Look how that jewel glows at her throat." Elora clutched the pendant. Pale fire pulsed in its depths. "It is no enchantment of domination," she called. "It is a promise of protection. Only fear twists protection into chains." Her gaze drilled into Marissa. "Fear like yours." Marissa's face tightened as though muscles were strings pulled too taut. She spurred her mare forward a step. Bold words for a girl who scrubbed floors while others built kingdoms. Elora's cheeks flushed, but she let the heat flow into resolve. "Perhaps scrubbing floors taught me to see the dirt you hide beneath your silks." Several soldiers choked back laughter. Marissa shot them a glare. Aldric raised a gauntleted hand for silence. "Enough," he barked. Then softer to Elora, "Daughter, if you truly choose this path, walk to me across the bridge. Speak without the dragon behind you." Rhaegar's hand stiffened, but Elora touched it, reassuring. "Let me," she whispered. "I will follow at a distance," he murmured. "At the first hint of harm." "You'll see me raise my hand," she said, "but trust me." He exhaled fire-warm air. "Go, bravely, torchbearer." She slipped through the gate that led to the narrow bridge. Below, heat shimmered in waves, and sulphurous steam hissed around stone supports. Each plank beneath her boots vibrated with the heartbeat of the mountain. She walked with deliberate calm, aware of archers tracking her but bows restrained. Halfway across, she paused where the rock widened just enough for a meeting. Aldric urged his horse forward until he could dismount on the flat stone. Up close, the lines in his face seemed deeper, his eyes rimmed with sorrow and confusion, rather than the cold dismissal she remembered from childhood. Elora's chest tightened. She wanted to throw arms around him, feel the orchard sunlight again, but a decade of distance stood like iron bars. He took a step toward her. "Elora, are you harmed?" "Not by Rhaegar," she answered. "Not since leaving the manor." She let the words hang, heavy with indictment. His mouth opened, closed. "Your stepmother told me you were deceived, that the dragon's magic ensnared your mind." "She used fear. She's used it on you for years." Elora searched his eyes. "Father, did you ever see my bruises? Did you ever ask who left them?" His shoulders sagged. Marissa said, "She lied." Elora said, voice rising like heat off stone, And you chose to believe her because it was easier than facing how you failed to protect me. He flinched as though struck. Silence stretched across the chasm until even the mountain seemed to hold its breath. A king can rule with fear, Elora said, softer now, but a father must see truth even when it hurts. Aldrich's gaze slid past her to the distant parapet where Rhaegar waited, half shadow, watchful, still. He is a beast, Aldrich said, but the protest sounded paper-thin. Elora's hand went to the healed patch of skin on her wrist. He is a man fighting a curse that was forced on him through betrayal. We both know what betrayal can do. She let him read the unspoken name, Marissa. Marissa's mare clopped onto the bridge. She dismounted with feline grace, crimson cloak trailing. Do not let this child's dramatics confuse you, she said, voice honeyed. The dragon poisons minds with false memoirs. She reached to grip Aldrich's arm. We claim what is ours. Elora noted the flick of Aldrich's eyes where Marissa's fingers dug. Hesitation cracked in him like ice. Marissa's gaze met Elora's, cold satisfaction nesting there. Her hand slipped beneath her cloak. Silver flashed. Elora saw the dagger a heartbeat before it flew. Reflex thrust her sideways, but not quick enough. The blade would have struck her heart had a blur of shadow and fire not intervened. Rhaegar landed between them, cloak swirling, hand snapping out to catch steel mid-flight. Sparks hissed when metal met his palm, and was crushed to shards that clattered onto stone. Chaos erupted. Soldiers surged. Archers raised bows. The fortress wall rang with shouts as defenders knocked arrows in response. Heat roiled off Rhaegar, scales racing under his skin. A horn butted at his temple, then retreated as he battled rage. Marissa backed away, eyes wide but cunning. See the monster unveiled. No. Aldrich whispered, stunned. I saw him save her. Elora grabbed Rhaegar's wrist, feeling heat fierce but not scalding. Breathe, she whispered. I'm all right. His blazing gaze flicked from her to the soldiers whose hands twitched on bowstrings. He forced a breath that smoked the air. Scales sank beneath skin. The horn smoothed. He straightened, letting everyone see he chose restraint. Elora turned to the lines of archers. Lower your weapons, your lady drew first blood. The front rank hesitated. Aldrich stepped forward, voice ringing. Stand down. Bows dipped. Feathered shafts trembled but did not fly. Elora exhaled shakily. Rhaegar addressed Marissa, voice hard. You attempt murder under a flag of parley. Such treachery merits dragon judgment. Marissa laughed, brittle edge cracking around the sound. What will you do? Burn me where I stand? Prove every tale true? Elora faced Marissa, stepping clear of Rhaegar's shadow. I think truth stands plain. You would have killed me rather than let the story unravel. Marissa's smile coiled. You always were ungrateful. I gave you House Dalcair's name when you were nothing. I was everything to him, Elora said, jerking her chin at Aldrich, until you taught him to doubt his own eyes. Aldrich's mouth opened, but words seemed to fail again. He slid a wary glance to Marissa's dagger shards glittering at his feet like broken vows. Elora, he said, voice hoarse, did she harm you? Truly? Elora met his gaze. Yes, often. And you did nothing. Marissa stepped sideways, hissing, lies sown by enchantment. I could show the bruises if dragon healing hadn't erased them, Elora replied. But truth leaves deeper marks. She touched the pendant, which glowed brighter the steadier her voice grew. Look at me, father. Do I seem enchanted? Tension wavered in the air like heat distortion. Aldrich's shoulders slumped. No. A single arrow hissed from a tremulous bow near the rear. Whether rogue zeal or accident, it sliced the sky toward Elora. Rhaegar roared. A sound of furnace doors slammed open. Wing-shaped shadows rippled across his back. But he did not transform. He thrust a palm upward. A sheet of fire hissed into being, thin as glass. The arrow hit mid-flight, ignited, and spiraled into glittering ash before it could touch her. Gasps rippled over both armies. Even Marissa's eyes widened. Rhaegar lowered his hand, the firewall vanishing back into nothing. He turned slowly, letting every watching soul see the unfallen arrow, the unhurting torchbearer. Control, he said, voice even, comes from love, not terror. Elora's chest constricted. He'd chosen the word deliberately, declaring that the curse no longer commanded him, choosing her. Father, she said, seizing the moment, what more proof do you need? Aldrich took a halting step toward her, then another. Tears glazed his eyes. I see you. He reached out, fingertips trembling, and lightly touched the chain at her throat. I see what I missed. Marissa advanced, eyes spitting fury. Fool, his flame corrupts your wits just as it did hers. She whirled on the soldiers. Seize them. No one moved. Half the men had seen Rhaegar spare their lord's daughter twice now. Others stared at the burned arrow's ghost. Fear shifted direction, away from the dragon, toward the venomous whisper of Marissa's commands. Rhaegar stepped aside, allowing father and daughter a fragile connection but keeping watch. Elora grasped Aldrich's hand. You can end this. Order your men to stand down, return home, and see what Marissa has hidden. Marissa snarled low in her throat. From beneath her cloak she drew a small vial, glass swirling with greenish smoke. Then perish together. She hurled it to the stone. The glass burst in a bloom of emerald vapor that raced outward faster than thought. Rhaegar reacted first, sweeping Elora and Aldrich behind his body. He exhaled a cone of blue-white fire so hot it roared invisible. The vapor met the flame and exploded upward, venting harmlessly into the sky where it dispersed into shimmering motes. Only the scent of burnt myrrh lingered. Marissa stumbled back, cloak singed. Her mare reared, nearly tossing her. She snarled something guttural and bolted toward her own lines, spurring the horse hard. Soldiers parted, startled by her sudden flight. Aldrich watched, horror dawning. Marissa. She didn't look back. Riders loyal more to fear than duty followed her retreat. Others hovered, uncertain. Rhaegar turned to Aldrich. Your men need orders. Decide wisely. Aldrich stared at the retreating crimson cloak, then at Elora. Regret carved deep valleys in his face. Men, he called, voice cracking but gathering strength. Lower your weapons. We withdraw. A cheer did not rise, only a hush of flat disbelief, then the slow clatter of spears returning to saddles. Horses wheeled. Riders formed ranks facing away from the fortress, waiting for further command. Those still loyal to Marissa faltered, caught between instructions. Rhaegar lifted his chin. A low growl vibrated, subtle but audible enough to chase them into obedience. Soon, all banners turned downslope, beginning the long, tense ride back toward cooler valleys. On the bridge, heat curled from fissures, the only sound the fizz of cooling stone. Elora held her father's hand as though fearing he might fade. Tears blurred her sight. You believed me. He swallowed. I should have years ago. Only then did she allow herself to embrace him. His armor was stiff, but his arms wrapped around her as they once had when she tripped over orchard roots. She smelled steel and forage instead of apple blossoms, yet the comfort was the same. When she pulled back, Rhaegar stood behind her, eyes softened, the gold within them glimmering calm. Aldrich followed her gaze to the Dragon Lord and inclined his head. I owe you more than apology. I cannot shape words. Then shape actions, Rhaegar replied gently. Listen to your daughter. Let truth root out fear. Aldrich nodded, eyes moist. He gripped Elora's shoulder. Will you remain here? Elora glanced at Rhaegar, warmth blooming. For now, there is much to mend, inside this mountain and beyond. She squeezed her father's hand once more. Go home, father. See the truth for yourself. Perhaps then we can begin again. He seemed 10 years older, yet hope flickered. I'll try. He mounted, raised a hand, and rode after his men, passing between ranks of fortress guards who watched quietly, bows relaxed yet ready. When last rider disappeared into swirling mountain mist, Elora's knees finally loosened. Rhaegar caught her waist before she could sway. Heat radiated through armor and cloth alike. She leaned into him, letting shaky breath out. "You faced them bravely," he murmured. "And you held back the fire. Because you hold it with me." He shifted, tracing the pendant with a knuckle. It pulsed bright where his skin met the stone. "We turned prophecy's first page today. Pages burn," she said, "but we'll write new ones from ash." He brushed lips to her hairline. "Let's return inside. You're trembling." "Not from fear." She smiled up at him. "From relief. And from thinking about what you'll say when we're alone again." A rare, wicked glint danced in his golden eyes. "I might let the dragon speak poetry. Then I might let the torchbearer answer." Hand in hand they crossed the bridge, each footstep echoing a promise. Fortress gates closed behind them, sealing in safety, yet nothing felt imprisoning anymore. Inside, servants peered in wonder. They had witnessed dragonfire turn to shield. Venomous lies burned clean. Hope flickered like fresh-lit lamps. As they climbed toward private halls, Rhaegar paused before the prophecy scroll's hidden chamber. "One more moment," he said. Inside the chamber, the scroll rested as they had left it, yet now new lines shimmered at the margins. Ink coalescing into text neither had seen. "When flame and faith align, chains shall splinter, but hearts must test the fire." Elora traced the new words, breathless. "It changes." "It responds," Rhaegar murmured, sliding an arm around her. "We forge future as we choose." She leaned back against his chest. "Then let's keep choosing." He kissed the top of her head. "Starting with supper. I suspect we burned more than prophecy today." She laughed, bright, echoing off stone and stoking warmth through halls where fear had long lain. And somewhere deep below, magma churned with a rhythm calmer than before, as if the mountain itself accepted their vow. Moonlight lingered beyond the balcony when Elora and Rhaegar slipped back inside, leaving the scent of cooling ash on the threshold. The corridors behind them kept their hush, as if the fortress itself sensed they needed silence more than fanfare. Rhaegar latched the heavy door and leaned his shoulders against it, exhaling slowly. The day's weight, leaving him in a long, low rush. His eyes found hers. Gold flecks dimmed to a softer ember, and for the first time since chaos erupted on the bridge, he allowed his stern composure to crack. He looked exhausted, relieved, and reverent all at once. "You stood on that bridge like flame made flesh," he said, voice hoarse but tender. Elora shrugged out of her shawl and crossed the distance between them. "I stood because you were behind me," she answered, palms sliding over the leather plates still strapped to his arms. "The mountain would have swallowed me whole without that." He took one of her hands, turning it over as if seeking burns. "You trembled in the aftermath, not during. I don't know whether to be proud or terrified." "I'll choose proud." She tugged at a scale-shaped buckle. "Off with these. Armor no longer suits the night." He obeyed, unfastening strap after strap until the leather pooled at their feet. Scales flickered along his skin, reacting to a memory of battle, but receded under her steady touch. She traced the healed crease in his palm, where Marissa's first dagger had struck, feeling the familiar hum of dragon magic beneath the skin. "Twice you caught her knives for me," she said quietly. "Twice I would again if needed. I hope the third time is never." He brought her fingers to his lips. "I hope there's only peace left to catch." They moved to the hearth, embers still glowing from earlier. Rhaegar added a single log that flared softly, casting honeyed light across patterned floor mosaics. Elora settled onto a broad, cushioned bench draped in burgundy, its fabric smelling faintly of cedar and cinnamon. Rhaegar kneeled to pour wine from a clay decanter into 2 small cups, fingers steady now that adrenaline had faded. A toast feels strange after a day like this, he said, offering her one cup. Then let's call it a promise. She tapped her cup gently to his. To truth, being louder than fear. They drank. The wine was warm and spiced with clover, sliding gentle heat down her throat that paired well with the safer heat of the hearth. Outside the balcony doors, wind sighed, carrying the distant rumble of magma stirring far below. Rhaegar sat beside her close enough that his thigh brushed hers. They watched flames dance, speaking in soft pulses. I grew up believing love was a debt, Elora said after a quiet stretch. Something owed to keep peace or pay for mistakes. He turned toward her, brow furrowing. Marissa planted that. She watered it. But doubt seeded long before. When Mother died, Father was broken. I started filling gaps, trying to make him notice if I was quiet or useful or perfect. She let a breath out. You noticed me even when I tried to kill you. You were never invisible, he answered. He touched her jaw, tilting her face until gold met green. And I was never perfect. My kingdom died of my arrogance long before your stepmother drew a single bruise. Perhaps we share more scars than we see. She traced the faint seam where a horn sometimes threatened his temple. Scars can guide us. Or chain us, he murmured. She leaned, kissing the spot gently. Not tonight. Tonight they lead us here. He cupped the back of her neck, drawing her closer till their lips met. Slow and searching. The kiss was unhurried. The give and take of two hearts feeling their way past prophecy toward something ordinary and extraordinary at once. His hand warmed at her waist. Hers slid over his chest, feeling steady beats under skin once ruled by unpredictable flame. They parted breathless, foreheads touching. I thought yesterday might be my last sunrise, he confessed. Yet here I am, grateful beyond language. Then we'll greet more sunrises, she whispered. Together. They spoke in murmurs about the future, painting impossible pictures, restored orchards, festivals without fear, sky rides on dragon wings Rhaegar would teach her to trust. She laughed at the idea of clinging to scaled neck ridges, wind whipping her braid loose while he promised he would never drop her. A gentle knock sounded. Rhaegar called permission. Corrin entered, balancing a tray of cheese, figs, and steaming broth. She set it on a side table, eyes bright with relief to find them safe. Rhaegar thanked her with a nod. Elora squeezed the girl's hand before she slipped away, door closing softly. They shared the figs, laughing over juice dripping along wrists. Conversation spiraled into childhood memories. Elora's first tumble from a tree branch, Rhaegar's earliest attempt at flight crashing into sand dunes. The closeness felt startlingly easy. After they ate, Rhaegar rose and offered his hand. Walk with me. The night is calm, and there's something I need to say beyond stone walls. They stepped onto the balcony. Stars splashed the sky in dense sweeps, unhindered by smoke for the first time in weeks. Lava rivers far below glimmered like slow-moving constellations on Earth, red mirrored above by silver. Rhaegar folded her hands in his. There's no telling what shape the prophecy still holds, he said, voice barely above the wind. If it demands a sacrifice, let it take me. I'd rather ashes than a world without you. Elora shook her head, tears pricking. That's not your choice alone. The prophecy speaks of love's final sacrifice, but sacrifice isn't always death. It can be trust, vulnerability, choosing hope even when fear screams louder. He brushed her cheek. You believe we can outwit fate. I believe love writes its own scrolls. She rested her palm on his chest. You taught me that by catching blades and holding back fire. Now let me teach you. We face destiny side by side, or not at all. He drew her closer until she felt his heartbeat strong beneath her hand. They stood like that for long minutes, listening to the mountain's low rumble and the hush of night wings somewhere in the dark. At length he touched his forehead to hers. Then I swear, he whispered, No power will part us. She nodded, sealing the vow with another soft kiss. They lingered until chill air tingled exposed skin. When they finally returned indoors, they left the balcony doors ajar, letting fresh air mingle with hearth warmth. Rhaegar banked the flames lower. Elora kicked off her boots and curled onto the bench, resting her head against his thigh as he sat beside her. He combed slow fingers through her hair, and she closed her eyes, surrendering to comfort she'd never imagined inside these walls. Silence was no longer absence. It was full, sweet as figs, thick as promise. She spoke drowsily. "When morning comes, what will we do first?" He smiled down at her. "Tell the kitchen to prepare pies packed with stolen orchard apples. Then feed every guard until belts burst." She laughed, the sound muffled by fabric. "Ambitious." "Hope tastes best when shared," he said. "We have a lot to replace. Fear's been the main course too long." Her eyes drifted half shut, but she forced them open. "You'll walk among your people free of curses. What if they fear you less, but expect miracles?" "Miracles are easier than curses," he replied. "A kind word can be miracle enough." His hand traveled to her shoulder, kneading gentle circles. Comfort lulled, but her mind stayed bright. "You once feared love would destroy. Does it still scare you?" "Yes," he said without hesitation, thumb stroking her collarbone as though marking each word. "But loving you scares me in the best way. It reminds me I'm alive." She shifted, sitting upright to face him fully. "And I love you in return," she said, letting the truth settle between them like a sunrise. "If that frightens destiny, let it tremble." He drew her near, kissing her slow, sealing confession and vow. The hours that followed unfolded like braided silk. Quiet whispers, tender laughs, limbs entwined beneath blankets. Two hearts learning the rhythm of peace rather than battle. Passion sparked yet never raged out of control. Desire coexisted with gentle reverence. Each caress a question answered in sighs and smiles. Later, wrapped in sheets, Elora watched firelight flicker across Rhaegar's sleeping face. Softness rarely granted a man burdened by centuries. She traced the curve of his brow, the faint lines at his mouth where laughter now lived. He stirred, eyes blinking open. "Still awake?" he murmured, "just loving the view?" He chuckled, voice rough with sleep, flattering a former dragon. "A current dragon," she corrected, "one who snores a little." He huffed mock offense, "Never." She grinned, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "Rest. Morning pies need a rested king." He muttered about pies and dragons before sleep reclaimed him. Elora nestled beside him, pendant resting between them. It pulsed warm, a heartbeat echoing theirs. She drifted, mind quiet for the first time since childhood. A ringing bell woke them sometime later. Rhaegar bolted upright, senses sharpened. Footsteps pounded in the corridor, followed by a sharp rap. "My lord," a guard shouted, urgency slicing through wood. "The southern tunnel has been breached." Rhaegar was out of bed before the words finished. Elora scrambled after him, dragging on trousers beneath her nightdress and lacing boots in one practiced motion. He tossed her a leather vest, lighter than armor but tougher than cloth, then buckled sword to his hip. She grabbed a hunting knife from the mantel, tucking it into her boot. Hallway torches flared as they ran. Guards raced past, shouting positions. A booming echo rattled somewhere below, like iron doors torn free. Heat pulsed from cracks in the floors, disturbed by chaos. Elora's pulse hammered a matching beat. A messenger skidded around a corner. Intruders came through the forgotten royal tunnel, he gasped. They overpowered the night watch. Rhaegar's jaw set. How many? A dozen at least, led by a woman in crimson. Marissa. Elora spat the name. Blood magic rages around her, the guard said. Some of our men. He hesitated, horror flickering. Some fell without a blade, clutching their hearts. Rhaegar's scales shimmered. Clear the wounded, seal inner doors behind us. The guard sprinted off. Rhaegar grasped Elora's shoulders. You should stay here. Not a chance. His eyes flashed between anger and admiration. He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. Then stay at my left where scales run thicker. They descended spiraling stairs, breath frosting in cold shafts, then warming as forge heat met night chill. Smiths dropped hammers, joining armed ranks. Elora passed Corran shepherding younger servants into safe alcoves. The maid's eyes brimmed with fear but hardened to resolve at Elora's nod. They emerged into the grand hallway outside the keep's heart. Crimson banners snapped in swirling vortexes of spell-born wind. Marissa stood in the center, mercenaries flanking her, armor blackened, blades oiled with shimmering crimson. She held a curved dagger stained dark green. At her feet lay two unconscious guards, veins pulsing eerie spheroid patterns beneath skin. Marissa's smile blazed wolf-bright. Ah, the dragon and his flame. I wondered how long love would keep you from unraveling. Elora stepped forward. You won't hurt anyone else, won't I? You rewrote the tale once, girl. Her voice crackled like ice underfoot. But prophecy bends. I've carved new lines in your absence. Rhaegar's voice rumbled, controlled but lethal. You carved only your own doom. Marissa flicked the dagger, eyes glinting. History proves I survived doom well enough. Mercenaries charged. Rhaegar met them head-on, sword flashing, scales blooming along forearms to deflect blades. Elora ducked under a swing, slashing the back of a knee, then pivoting to elbow another attacker's jaw. Movement became instinct, fear contained by purpose. Rhaegar's power unfurled. Heat waves shuddered the air as each strike sent sparks cascading. Yet he held his full dragon in check, mindful of allies nearby. Marissa advanced during the chaos, eyes locked on Elora. She whispered guttural syllables. The dagger's edge bled green fire. Elora lunged, intercepting. Steel rang. Shock jolted her arm. Poison sizzled along the dagger, leaving dark residue on her blade. Marissa's grin widened. You can't outfight destiny, Marissa hissed. It drinks coward hearts for breakfast. I'm not the coward here. Elora shot back. Marissa feinted left, then struck. Elora parried, but the angle forced her foot back into loose gravel, and she slipped. The blade whistled toward her throat. Heat slammed in, the world filled with roaring flame. Rhaegar materialized, catching the dagger in his palm. Poison flared again, brighter than before, rippling like oil across his skin. His eyes widened. Molten gold shifted sickly. Rhaegar! Elora screamed. He pushed her aside, hand still clasping Marissa's weapon. Poison raced up his arm, black veins marring bronze skin. Scales erupted, claws following. Roars of agony rolled down the corridor, mixing with frightened shouts. Marissa yanked back her blade, then slashed at his chest, scoring scales. Blackened ichor splattered stone. Elora lunged, but a mercenary caught her jacket. She stabbed his thigh, then shoved past. Rhaegar staggered, half-shifted, wings ripping fabric. He tried to force them under control, but poison surged, twisting magic wild. Fire burst outward, licking walls. Mercenaries fled. Marissa retreated a step, dagger raised, though terror flickered in her eyes for the first time. Elora felt heat sear her hair tips but pushed through, calling Rhaegar's name. He turned, pupils slit, teeth fanged. Yet beneath the dragon fury she saw recognition flicker. Pain carved across his features. He raised clawed fingers as if to warn her away. She walked into the flames. Pillars of fire parted around her like curtains stirred by soft breeze. The heat should have destroyed skin, yet it merely kissed with warmth, pendant blazing at her throat. She laid a hand on his scaled cheek. His entire form trembled. Breathe with me, she whispered, voice steady though her heart pounded. Hear my heartbeat. Claws flexed, then gentled. Fire in the corridor dimmed. She stepped closer, arms sliding around his widened torso, where scales met flesh. Her cheek pressed to his chest, finding the frantic thunder of his heart. I choose you, she said. Choose me back. A shudder rippled through him. Light burst from the pendant, flooding hallways in blinding gold. Marissa shrieked. Wind roared, sucking flames inward. Rhaegar's body lifted in a vortex of molten light. Elora held tight within. Above them, stone runes blazed, then cracked, releasing centuries of trapped magic like birds freed from cages. Dragonfire swirled, shifting from red to white to shimmering aurora. Elora's pendant melted into liquid gold, seeping into Rhaegar's skin at her touch. A ringing silence followed, pure and vast. The whirlwind collapsed, depositing them onto cooled stone. Rhaegar's form curled protectively around Elora. His wings fell away like ash, dissolving into sparks. Scales sunk. The black veins faded. When he lifted his head, golden eyes shone clear and human. He breathed once, a shaky laugh mixing relief and disbelief. "Elora," he whispered, voice unbroken by growl. "It's gone." She cupped his cheeks. "We broke it together." Behind them, Marissa scrambled to her feet, stumbling. Her dagger clattered from weak fingers. She turned to flee, but a wall of armed guards blocked the path. Aldrich at their head. He looked older, shadows deep beneath weary eyes. But resolve hardened his jaw. "Lady Marissa," he said, voice carrying quiet thunder, "you are done." She spat, lunged for a fallen sword, but two soldiers seized her. She thrashed, screaming curses in ancient tongues. Eldritch sparks sputtered, powerless now that the dragon magic had dissipated. Aldrich approached Elora and Rhaegar. He knelt, armor creaking. "Daughter." His voice broke. "I saw everything." Elora rose shakily, Rhaegar steadying her. She faced her father. "The truth stands clear now." Tears slipped from Aldrich's eyes. "I failed you beyond forgiveness." She reached to wipe one away. "Forgiveness doesn't erase failing. But we begin again." He clasped her hands, pressing them to his heart. "If you'll let me try." She nodded, tears matching his. Rhaegar watched, eyes bright with shared emotion. Aldrich turned to him, swallowing. "I misjudged you, Lord Dragon. Thank you for sparing my people and for loving my child." "I love her beyond any titles," Rhaegar said simply. "May we build peace together." Aldrich bowed deeply, then gestured for guards to escort Marissa away. She fought until shackles snapped closed, then fell silent, hatred shredding her features. When the hall emptied of chaos, Elora sagged. Rhaegar scooped her countess style, ignoring her protest, carrying her along quieter passageways to the balcony, where pale dawn blossomed over peaks. Air smelled newly clean as though storms had scrubbed the sky. Rhaegar set her down against the stone railing. Ash had stopped falling. "Look," he murmured. "First sunrise of freedom." Pink slipped up the horizon, gilding edges of clouds. Lava flows shimmered gentler, mirroring dawn's color. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Whatever we choose." He turned, taking her hand. "I would start with this." He knelt, great dragon lord humbled on stone still warm from earlier fires. His hand trembled, but voice rang clear. "Elora Dalcair, flame of my heart, will you marry me? Not as sacrifice, but as partner, equal, and love, for all my days." Tears blurred her sight until sunrise became radiant smear. She laughed, half sob, and pulled him upright. "Yes, yes, 100 times." He spun her once, joy bursting like fireworks. She pressed her forehead to his. "We rose from ashes," she whispered. He finished, voice hushed with awe. "And together, we'll shape the sky." They stayed on the balcony until the first birds ventured out, wings cutting pale streaks across the sky. The new sun warmed the fortress walls, turning obsidian statues into silhouettes that almost seemed to bow. Elora's yes still echoed in Rhaegar's chest, reverberating louder than distant magma. Yet when her stomach rumbled loud enough to make him laugh, the promise of simple breakfast felt like another miracle. They descended to the great hall hand in hand. Overnight, servants had scrubbed scorch marks from the floor and replaced shattered sconces with polished brass. Guards greeted them not with stiff salutes but with genuine smiles, relief shining through fatigue. Someone had arranged a trestle table near the hearth and covered it with platters of flatbread, roasted peaches, and steaming crocks of honeyed oats. Corin hurried forward, flushed with excitement. "You're both safer," she breathed. "We tried to keep the fires low so you could rest." Elora hugged her. "You've done more than enough." "Not yet," Corin whispered, eyes dancing. "The kitchen is already planning apple pies, and Lord Aldrich sent crates of fruit from the lowlands as a peace gift." Rhaegar raised a brow. "They arrived before dawn?" "Riders wouldn't sleep until they did," Corin said proudly. He nodded, gratitude soft in his voice. "Tell the bakers their pies will be legend." Corin curtsied and hurried off. Rhaegar guided Elora to a bench close to the fire. The smells, cinnamon, yeast, sweet peach, wrapped around them, tangible proof that fear no longer ruled these halls. They ate quietly at first, exchanging small smiles whenever fingers brushed over plates. After a few bites, Elora set down her spoon. "We should speak with Father before the day grows older." "He asked to meet mid-morning," Rhaegar said, "and the Council of Household Captains wishes to address rebuilding. We can join them afterward." A flicker of anxiety passed through her eyes. "Do you think the staff fears change?" "I think they fear uncertainty," he answered gently. "But uncertainty leaves room for hope. We'll fill that space together." Aldrich arrived an hour later in a plain tunic, armor set aside. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, but his posture was lighter than Elora could remember. He bowed first to Rhaegar, then gathered his daughter's hands. "I've drafted letters to every baron who followed Marissa's call," he said. "They will stand down." Rhaegar inclined his head. "Your word carries weight." "I realize now how long I let another's voice speak through me." Aldrich's gaze fell to Elora. "I wish repentance came easier." "It begins with action," she replied softly. "And conversation." They spent the next hour in the council chamber, once a war room rimmed with maps of siege tactics, now scattered with parchment plans for irrigation channels, new orchards, and fortification repairs. Captains, quartermasters, and scribes filed in to listen, curiosity edging caution. Rhaegar stood at the head of the long table, Elora and Aldrich flanking him like north and south stars. He spoke plainly. No new taxes, fair pay for guards, open trade routes to valleys long starved by fear of dragon fire. Elora added proposals for schooling children of the fortress and outlying villages, offering lessons in reading and herbal medicine. Aldrich pledged seedlings from Dalcair lands to replanted gardens. Murmurs of approval grew into tentative cheer. When the meeting adjourned, staff lingered just to shake Elora's hand or offer Rhaegar a grateful bow. Hope, it seemed, was infectiously delicious as the promised pies. In the corridors afterward, Rhaegar slipped an arm around Elora's shoulders. "They trust you." "They trust change," she said. "That's bigger than me." They paused near the courtyard where artisans had erected a makeshift platform to repair scorched stone. Through an archway, Elora glimpsed soldiers escorting a bound Marissa into the keep's inner chambers, awaiting formal trial at sundown. For a moment, old fear clawed her stomach. Rhaegar's hand tightened reassuringly. The trial convened in the great hall, torches blazing bright as early dusk painted the high windows. Witnesses testified to Marissa's years of cruelty, her poison, her shadowed deals. Even her mercenaries, disarmed and cowed, spoke of dark rituals she used to bind their loyalty. Marissa, wrapped in chains of tempered steel, met every accusation with a cold smile or a lazy shrug. Only when Aldrich stepped forward did her composure crack. He described bruises he'd ignored, lies he'd believed, and the dagger aimed at his daughter's heart. His voice shook, but each word landed like hammer strikes. Marissa scoffed, but no spell or sneer could part the crowd's silence. When it was Elora's turn to speak, she steadied her breath and faced her stepmother without flinching. "Pain taught me endurance," she said, voice clear. "But love taught me to live, and love, unlike fear, cannot be chained." She did not ask for vengeance, only truth. The hall seemed to exhale, an ancient breath held for too many seasons. Judgment was swift. Exiled to the barren northern wastes, escorted by guards loyal to the crown. No gallows, no public spectacle, simply removal of poison. Marissa's eyes flared, but words failed her at last. She was led away before midnight. The fortress felt lighter for her absence, as though a shutter had been thrown wide, letting dawn chase stale smoke. Rhaegar found Elora alone in the inner garden afterward, moonlight spilling over glowing white blooms. "It's over," he said. "Almost," she replied, "and there's still tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he mused, smiling, a word that finally sounds kind. They walked path after path until moon offset behind clouds. Then they parted, Elora to the guest wing, so traditions of wedding morn could be honored, Rhaegar to his rooms where he penned vows by low lamplight. Footsteps slowed outside his door. Aldrich entered after a gentle knock. The two men stood facing each other, neither in armor, neither hiding behind titles. Aldrich cleared his throat. "You've already given my family more grace than I deserve. But I must ask you for another gift. Take care of her joy, always." "With my life," Rhaegar said. He hesitated, then extended his hand. Aldrich shook it, grasp firm and sincere. Morning arrived wrapped in rose-gold clouds. Inside Elora's chamber, servants fussed with braided ribbons woven through her hair, pinning delicate blossoms at intervals. The gown they laced her into had been fashioned from silk preserved in cedar chests. A pale ivory, touched with faint silver threads that caught light like morning dew. Over her heart lay the redesigned pendant, now a smooth disk of dragon steel etched with two intertwined flames. Corrin fastened the final clasp. "You're glowing more than these candles." "Maybe the candles should feel honored," Elora teased, though nerves fluttered under her ribs. Men in the courtyard raised wooden benches, draped fresh tapestries, and lined a carpet of woven wildflowers down the stone aisle. Local farmers filed in wearing best linen, children clutching tiny cakes baked overnight. Sentries stood at ease, helmets polished but swords peace-tied. A quartet of lutanists practiced gentle melodies while their breath clouded in crisp dawn air. Rhaegar waited near the ancient fountain where water ran clear over obsidian dragon wings. He wore a slate-gray tunic, trimmed in white, simple leather bracers strapped over heeled wrists. When trumpets sounded, every head turned to watch Elora step through archway light. Breath caught across the courtyard like one shared gasp. She walked toward him, each stride easy, though tears blurred her gaze. She could see only him, and the way his face opened with wonder carved a permanent memory in her heart. They met beneath the fountain's arc. Rhaegar took her hands, kissing knuckles one by one, whispering so only she could hear, "You are the miracle I never dared seek." She smiled, whisper laughing, "You hog all the good lines." They faced the officiant, a kindly scholar who had once chronicled dragon lore, now entrusted to bless their union. His brief words spoke of heat forging steel, of trust outlasting night storms, of love rewriting scrolls inked by fate. When the vows came, Rhaegar spoke first, voice low but carrying across hushed faces. He promised to cherish her curiosity, to build a world where fire warmed rather than burned, to share every sunrise and shelter her through every eclipse. Elora responded, pledging to walk alongside him in sky and shadow, to remind him of laughter when dragons threatened sorrow, and to grow orchards from ash whenever despair thought it had won. They exchanged rings hammered from dragon steel and set with slivers of obsidian scoured from the mountain heart. When the officiant declared them bound, Rhaegar leaned in. The kiss was soft yet sure, and in that moment, the courtyard erupted with applause, cheers, and the ringing of bells Aldrich ordered hung from every tower. As guests mingled, tables laden with pies and roasted meats filled the air with mouth-watering aromas. Children chased each other around pillars, giggling. Aldrich approached the newlyweds with a small wooden box. Inside lay 2 tiny apple blossoms, pressed and dried, edges browned with time. "These survived the orchard fire years ago," he said, voice thick. "A gardener found them in the ashes." He handed them to Elora. "They belong with you now." She placed them inside her bodice near her heart. "Thank you." Rhaegar drew Aldrich into a brief embrace. The man stiffened in surprise, then returned the gesture with gratitude. The feast stretched into afternoon. Musicians played lively reels while villagers demonstrated circle dances. Guards swapped tales with farmers, trading war scars for harvest stories. Even the mountain haze seemed to lift. Late, as the sun's rim kissed the horizon, Elora pulled Rhaegar aside to the western parapet. The sky burned orange and violet, lava flows mirroring color in lazy ribbons. She leaned against him, cheek on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss the dragon part of you?" she asked. He laced his fingers with hers. "The wings sometimes, the freedom." He smiled softly. "But in many ways I feel lighter now. I don't need wings to soar." "Maybe we'll fly anyway," she said, "together." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Always together." Trumpets sounded from the gatehouse, riders from allied baronies arriving to pledge peace. Aldrich went to greet them, cloak snapping in the fresh breeze. Elora watched him go, warmth spreading. "He looks alive." "Your courage revived him," Rhaegar said. "And mine." The last of daylight spilled across their faces. Elora closed her eyes, feeling its warmth like the gentlest forge. She whispered words once spoken in fear, now in joy. "We rose from ashes." His arm tightened. "And together," he finished, voice steady and bright, "we'll shape the sky." The next week sifted by like bright sand. It was hard to track individual grains when every one of them glinted with some first-time wonder. Elora learned quickly that joy could be exhausting. Dawn rides to survey the valley, afternoon councils to hash out road repairs, twilight lessons on dragon history whispered in the library where she once tried to hide a dagger. She drank every moment in until her head spun with possibility, then spilled her excitement into plans that made scribes scurry to keep up. The fortress changed alongside her. Masons patched scorched pillars, laughing whenever Rhaegar stopped to haul stone twice his size without breaking a sweat. Children from the village crept through the gates on market days, and discovered the once dreaded courtyard was now a place to chase each other between pie stalls. Someone planted apple seedlings in tubs along the main walk. The tiny trees looked fragile against black rock, but they stood all the prouder for it. A fortnight after the wedding, Elora and Rhaegar climbed the south watchtower to watch the first supply caravan from Dalcair province wind its way up the pass. A banner of silver crescents fluttered over crates stacked with saplings, seed grain, and bolts of fresh canvas. At the head of the convoy rode Aldrich, cloak flapping as he waved to sentries. "He keeps surprising me," Elora murmured, leaning into the warm press of Rhaegar's side. "He's making good on promises," Rhaegar said. "You gave him courage to start." They descended to meet the caravan. Aldrich swung from his saddle, grinning like he'd aged in reverse. Dust streaked his boots, but his eyes shone clear. "I brought more than you asked," he said, pulling back a tarp to reveal barrels of honey wine. "For the midsummer festival you mentioned." Elora's face lit. "You remembered." She hugged him tight. The embrace still felt new, but it was no longer tentative. Aldrich turned to Rhaegar, extending a sealed scroll. "Parliament ratified the peace charter. They've recognized your sovereignty and pledged trade." Rhaegar broke the wax and skimmed, shoulders loosening. "Thank you." "Peace benefits us all," Aldrich said. He hesitated, then added quietly, "And if you'll accept it, I wish to remain a while. I'd like to help plant those orchards." Rhaegar glanced at Elora, smile widening when she nodded. "You're welcome as long as you choose to stay." Later, once wagons were unpacked and saplings tucked into prepared earth, Elora slipped away to the hidden library chamber. She'd visited the prophecy scroll only once since the curse broke, half afraid tampering might rewrite hard-won peace. But curiosity burned brighter today. She found the scroll poised on the pedestal, silver ink shimmering softly. New words had bloomed at the margin, just 2 short lines. Love tempered fire and made the world new. She touched the glowing text, warmth blooming under her fingertips. When she withdrew, the letters faded into ordinary ink, as if waiting quietly for the next chapter to prove itself. Footsteps padded behind her. Rhaegar entered, boots silent on basalt. Checking on our unruly scroll? It keeps writing poetry, she said, stepping aside so he could see. Short, this time. He read, expression caught between amusement and awe. I like that it's become less dramatic. She laughed. Clearly it's been listening to Corin's nightly ballad experiments. She's not shy with rhymes. He wrapped an arm around her waist. The scroll can't best her. She wrote a song comparing apple pies to everlasting hope. Which makes me hungry. He kissed her temple. Then let's raid the kitchen. They emerged into dusk's lavender glow. The courtyard bustled with preparations for the festival, lanterns strung like glowing fruit, musicians tuning lutes, bakers carting trays of sweet dough to the ovens. Rhaegar commandeered 2 still warm hand pies and passed one to Elora. They ate leaning against a half-repaired wall, powdered sugar dotting their chins. Corin spotted them mid-bite. You're supposed to taste pies at the judge's table tomorrow, not tonight, she called, hands on hips. Rhaegar feigned shock. Test bites ensure fairness. Corin's stern act melted into a grin. You'll spoil your appetites, but go ahead. Lightning flickered far off in the east, silent but bright. Elora tipped her head. Summer storm over the plains. Rhaegar's gaze followed the flash. Feels like the sky is stretching after a long sleep. Let's stretch with it, Elora said. Show me the heights you promised. He arched a brow. Now? No time like late dusk. She licked sugar from her thumb, eyes sparkling. I'm ready. Minutes later they climbed the windy stairs to the highest observation platform, once the vantage for sentries spotting enemy banners, now simply the best view in a kingdom reborn. From here the valley unfurled in greens and charcoals, rivers glinting copper where last sunbeams lingered. The storm's distant flashes painted cloud bellies in quicksilver bursts. Rhaegar stepped back, eyes gleaming. Hold very tight. She gripped his arms. With a slow exhale, he called forth wings. Not the wild, involuntary eruption of scales she'd seen before, but a controlled bloom. Membranes of obsidian fringed with faint opal shimmer. They caught the breeze, rustling like sails. Beneath, scales edged across his shoulders and spine, then halted, as if answering precise commands. Ready? Her heart hammered. Yes. He lifted her, one arm beneath her knees, the other steadying her back. A downbeat of wings kicked dust from the platform. Then they rose, smooth, steady. Wind tore at her hair, stole her laugh, tugged the hem of her dress upward. She looped her arms around his neck, exhilaration soaring higher with each heartbeat. Below, the fortress shrank to a cluster of glowing windows. Workers paused, pointing upward. The orchard saplings looked like tiny flickers of jade candlelight lined in neat rows along the black rock. Lava flows etched faint glowing veins further down the mountain. They banked east toward the storm. Clouds boiled violet on the horizon, but air around them stayed windless, caught between day and night. Rhaegar kept the flight low enough that torch lines remained visible. After a swooping arc that made Elora's stomach tumble pleasantly, he descended to a broad balcony, carved halfway up the southern face, one seldom used except by moonwatchers. He sat down gently, wings retracted, scales fading until only bronze skin remained. She pressed both hands to his chest, feeling his delighted tremor. You did it, she breathed. Controlled the dragon part entirely. Not entirely, he said, eyes bright. The dragon and I are partners now. Maybe marriage taught a commitment. He laughed, pulling her close. If so, it's a quick study. The laughter faded into a soft hum when their lips met. Stars burst bright overhead, scattering across the dark like sugar on pies. She tilted her face to watch them after the kiss broke. Do dragons ever fly beyond clouds? She asked. All the time. He traced her jaw. Someday we'll ride storms, but tonight the valley needs its rulers earthbound. Rulers. She tasted the word. I still feel like the same girl who scrubbed Marissa's floor. Power doesn't erase beginnings, he said. It simply gives them new endings. Down in the courtyard, musicians struck up a lively tune for the final rehearsal. Laughter floated upward, punctuated by Corin's voice guiding dancers through steps. Warm lamplight spilled across banners now stitched in colors of both dragon wing and torch flame. Elora squeezed his hand. Let's join them. Tomorrow our people celebrate the end of fear. We should be at the heart of it. They glided down narrow stairs carved into the rock and entered the courtyard, just as a drummer beat a spirited rhythm. Children squealed around them, fearless, tugging at Elora's dress to share candied nuts. Rhaegar took a spoon from a cook-ladling soup and tasted it, pronouncing it perfection. Laughter followed him like sparks from a forge. Aldrich emerged carrying a sleepy toddler who had refused to leave the festivities. He smiled when he saw his daughter. I look around and hardly recognize this place. That's the point, Elora said, hugging him with one arm. Change is the best kind of unfamiliar. Aldrich placed the toddler, his steward's son, into Elora's arms for a moment. The boy patted her cheek, fascinated by her silver hair ribbons. Rhaegar watched, tenderness stirring. Later, while dancers spun into a new set of steps, he nudged her softly. See yourself with little ones? She flushed. Do you? He brushed knuckles across her spine. Often lately. Maybe in spring, she said, surprised by her own easy certainty. Or sooner, he teased. She swatted his shoulder. Pie first, empire later. He laughed and tugged her into the dance. They stepped in time with villagers and guards alike. Skirts twirling, boots stamping. Music climbed high, spilling into night air. Lightning flashes on the distant plain synchronized with drum beats, painting momentary silhouettes of fluttering banners. As the song ended, Elora and Rhaegar stood in the circle's center, breathing hard. Corin clapped delightedly. Torches flickered, and the crowd parted to reveal soldiers escorting a wagon through the gates piled high with fresh-cut branches hung with small white blooms. Aldrich stepped forward. Your orchard arrived early, he announced. Planting begins at dawn. Cheers erupted. Rhaegar bowed to the bearers. Elora pressed a blossom into Corin's hair, then tucked another behind Rhaegar's ear. He made a mock scowl, but left it there, grinning. Night settled deeper. One by one lanterns dimmed, children ushered off to bed. Elora and Rhaegar walked the quiet halls, hands intertwined. They paused outside the prophecy chamber once more. Elora glanced at him. Want to check? He shook his head. Let the scroll sleep, it deserves a rest. They continued upward to their chambers. Inside, candles waited lit. Rhaegar guided her to the window seat overlooking newly staked orchard rows and flickering watchfires. Remember the first night you saw me in full dragon form? He asked. I thought you were both beautiful and terrifying. And now? She leaned into him, smile gentle. Just beautiful. He tilted her chin, kissing her slowly. The kiss deepened until words dissolved. Later, wrapped in blankets, they watched embers die to soft glow. The sky feels bigger, Elora murmured, eyelids heavy. Because we know we belong in it, he said. And tomorrow, when we plant those trees, we root ourselves too. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of cedar smoke and apple blossoms. Roots and wings, she said, half asleep. Perfect balance. His arm tightened around her. We rose from ashes. And together, she whispered, drifting into dreams bright as dawn, we'll shape the sky. Outside night carried onward, peaceful at last, while two hearts, once forged in fire and fear, beat steady, guiding a kingdom toward a horizon painted with endless possibilities.